In the pantheon of Greek mythology, no hero shines brighter, nor suffers more profoundly than Hercules, known to the Romans as Hercules. His name echoes through millennia, a testament to superhuman strength, unwavering resolve, and a destiny forged in both divine favor and relentless torment. But before he became the legendary figure whose 12 impossible tasks defined heroism, Hercules was born a forbidden union, marked by a jealous goddess, and destined for a life far grander and more tragic than any mortal could ever conceive. Our story begins in the city of Thebes, under the reign of King Amphitryon, or so it seemed, while Amphitryon, a direct descendant of the hero Perseus, was away at war, fighting against the Taphians. A momentous deception was unfolding. Zeus, the king of the gods, eternally drawn to mortal women, had set his eyes upon Alcmene, Amphitryon's virtuous and beautiful wife. Knowing her devotion to her husband, Zeus resorted to an elaborate trick. He assumed the guise of Amphitryon, returning victorious from battle. Alcmene, overjoyed by her husband's supposed return, unknowingly welcomed Zeus into her chambers, conceiving a child of divine lineage. The very next night, the true Amphitryon returned, and Alcmene, confused but dutiful, also lay with him, conceiving a second son. Thus, Alcmene became pregnant with twins, one son of mortal parentage, Iphicles, and the other, the mighty Hercules, destined to be a demigod, a son of Zeus himself. This act of divine infidelity, however, did not escape the notice of Hera, Zeus's queen and sister, the goddess of marriage and childbirth. Her jealousy, legendary and boundless, burned with an unquenchable fire whenever Zeus strayed, especially when his dalliances produced offspring. And so, even before Heracles drew his first breath, Hera plotted. She foresaw the birth of Zeus's son and sought to diminish his future glory. On the day Alcmene was to give birth, Zeus, in a boastful moment, declared to the Olympian gods, "Today a man will be born from my lineage who will rule over all those who dwell around him." Hera, seizing the opportunity, tricked Zeus into swearing an unbreakable oath by the river Styx that this prophecy would indeed come true. Immediately after, Hera hastened to Argos, where she deliberately delayed Alcmene's labor and accelerated the birth of Eurystheus, a weak and sickly cousin of Heracles, born 7 months prematurely. Thus, it was Eurystheus, not Heracles, who was born first from Zeus's lineage on that fateful day, unwittingly claiming the divine decree of lordship. Zeus, bound by his own oath, could do nothing but rage at Hera's cunning. Heracles, when he finally arrived, was powerful but now cursed, destined to serve the very man he was supposed to rule. From his infancy, Heracles displayed extraordinary strength. As a mere babe, while he and his twin Iphicles lay in their cradle, Hera sent 2 enormous serpents to kill him. Iphicles cried out in terror, but Heracles, with the innate power of his divine father, calmly seized one serpent in each hand and strangled them, presenting their lifeless bodies to his astonished parents. This early feat cemented his extraordinary nature and further fueled Hera's bitter resentment. Despite this clear sign of divine favor, or perhaps because of it, Hera's hatred never waned. Throughout his youth, Heracles was trained in the arts of war and intellect. He learned archery from Eurytus, wrestling from Autolycus, and music from Linus, though his immense strength sometimes led to accidental tragedies, like the time he killed Linus with a lyre in a fit of temper. His sheer power, unmatched among mortals, promised a future of glory, but also carried the weight of unpredictable violence. As a young man, Heracles performed numerous heroic deeds, showcasing his prodigious strength and courage. He rid the city of Thebes of a giant lion that plagued the region, using its invincible hide as his cloak and its gaping maw as his helmet, a fearsome sight that would become his iconic attire. He led the Theban army to victory against the Minions, for which he was rewarded with the hand of Princess Megara, King Creon's daughter. Heracles and Megara had 3 children, creating what seemed to be a blissful and ordinary family life for the mighty hero. Yet, Hera's vengeful eye never left him. She watched his happiness, and her malice festered. The more content Heracles became, the more unbearable her jealousy grew. And then, the unspeakable tragedy struck. In a moment of absolute, horrifying madness, sent by the vengeful goddess Hera, Heracles was overcome by a fit of temporary insanity. In this fit, his vision, clouded by a divine delusion, He tragically mistook his beloved wife, Megra, and their 3 innocent children for monstrous enemies. With his legendary strength, he mercilessly slew them all. When the madness finally lifted, Hercules awoke to a scene of unimaginable horror, his hands stained with the blood of his own family. The weight of his actions, though divinely induced, crushed his spirit. He was overcome with unbearable grief, shame, and remorse. His world, once filled with love and purpose, lay shattered by his own hands, a cruel testament to Hera's unrelenting spite. Overwhelmed by his guilt, Heracles fled Thebes, seeking refuge and a means of atonement. He traveled to Delphi, the sacred sanctuary of Apollo, to consult the oracle and seek guidance on how to cleanse himself of this terrible crime. The Pythia, Apollo's priestess, delivered the prophecy that would change his destiny forever. She commanded him to journey to Tiryns and serve his cousin, King Eurystheus, the very man Hera had destined to rule over him. For 12 years, Heracles was to perform whatever labors Eurystheus demanded, no matter how arduous or impossible they seemed. Only through these 12 monumental tasks, she foretold, would Heracles achieve purification for his sins and, ultimately, gain immortality among the gods. Heracles, humbled and desperate for expiation, accepted his fate. He journeyed to Tiryns, a magnificent fortress city, where the cowardly and jealous king Eurystheus awaited. Eurystheus, fully aware of Heracles' immense strength but equally fearful of his power and popularity, saw this as an opportunity to rid himself of his formidable cousin. He was determined to devise tasks so dangerous, so utterly insurmountable, that Heracles would surely perish in the attempt, or at the very least, be humiliated beyond recovery. And so, the stage was set for the legendary 12 labors, a series of trials designed by a petty king and a vengeful goddess, yet destined to cement Heracles' name as the greatest hero in all of Greek mythology. The first of these impossible tasks would pit Heracles against a beast of unparalleled might, a creature whose skin was impervious to any weapon, the Nemean lion. Eurystheus, eager to see Heracles fail, decreed that not only must a lion be slain, but his impenetrable hide must be brought back as proof. Heracles, now driven by the crushing weight of his past and the promise of future redemption, prepared to face his destiny, unaware of the terrifying challenges that lay ahead, each more perilous than the last. His journey into legend had truly begun. Having accepted his tragic fate and the divine command to serve King Eurystheus, Heracles stood at the precipice of his legendary trials. Each task, concocted by the petty king at the insidious suggestion of Hera, was designed not only to be insurmountable, but also to result in Heracles' death or disgrace. Yet, from the depth of his despair, a new purpose emerged, atonement. And so, the demigod, clad in his lion skin and wielding his mighty club, embarked on the first leg of his harrowing journey, facing beasts that terrorized the mortal world. The first labor, the Nemean lion. Eurystheus' first demand was simple in its phrasing, yet utterly terrifying in its execution. Bringing the hide of the Nemean lion, this monstrous beast, an offspring of Typhon and Echidna, with an impenetrable golden fur, had been terrorizing the region of Nemea, preying on villagers and livestock. Its lair was a cavern with 2 entrances, a place of dread and death. Heracles arrived in Nemea, a land desolated by the lion's depredations. He first attempted to slay the beast with his arrows, but they merely bounced off its thick hide. He then tried his sword, which bent uselessly, and his olive wood club, which shattered upon impact. This was no ordinary animal. It was a creature of divine resilience. Realizing that conventional weapons were useless, Heracles cornered the lion in its lair. With one entrance blocked, he engaged the beast in hand-to-hand combat within the confined space. The struggle was ferocious, a titanic clash between primal strength and divine might. The lion, with its razor claws and powerful jaws, lunged at Heracles, but the hero's own superhuman strength was his undoing. Heracles grappled the monstrous creature, his muscles bulging as he squeezed the life out of it. He clamped his powerful hands around its throat, crushing its windpipe, holding it in an unbreakable vice until the beast finally succumbed, suffocated by the very hands it sought to tear apart. The challenge now was to skin the beast. Its hide, impervious to all weapons, resisted every attempt. It was then that Athena, his half-sister and patron goddess, appeared to him in a vision. She advised him to use one of the lion's own claws to flay its skin. Following her guidance, Hercules successfully skinned the formidable creature. He then donned the lion's hide as his own armor. It's impenetrable for offering him protection, and its gaping maw becoming his helmet. This fearsome attire would forever have to be his distinguishing mark, a chilling symbol of his incredible strength and his victory over the seemingly invincible. When he returned to Mycenae, carrying the enormous carcass, King Eurystheus was so terrified by Heracles' raw power and the fearsome trophy that he immediately hid in a large bronze jar and forbade Heracles from ever entering the city again. All future labors were to be announced through Eurystheus' herald, Coprius, and the trophies simply laid outside the city walls. The first impossible task was complete, but Heracles' journey had only just begun. The second labor, the Lernaean Hydra. Eurystheus' second command was arguably even more monstrous than the first: slay the Lernaean Hydra. This terrifying creature, another offspring of Typhon and Echidna, lurked in the swamps of Lerna. It possessed numerous heads, though the exact number varies in different accounts. Some say 5, some 7, some 9, and some as many as 50 or even 100. Regardless of the number, one head was always immortal, and as soon as one was cut off, 2 new ones would sprout in its place. To make matters worse, the Hydra's breath was poisonous, and merely touching its blood was lethal. Hera, still plotting Heracles' demise, sent a giant crab, Carcinus, to assist the Hydra and distract the hero. Heracles, accompanied by his loyal nephew Iolaus, journeyed to Lerna. Upon finding the Hydra's lair, he forced it out into the open using flaming arrows. The battle was gruesome. Heracles attacked with his club and sword, but every time he lopped off a head, 2 more immediately grew in its place, his efforts seemingly futile. The Hydra hissed, its multiple heads striking and spitting venom, while the giant crab nipped at Heracles' feet. Realizing the conventional approach was failing, Heracles called upon Iolaus for help. Iolaus, in a stroke of genius, quickly fetched a burning brand from a nearby woods. As Heracles severed each head, Iolaus swiftly cauterized the stump with a flaming torch, preventing new heads from sprouting. Finally, only the immortal head remained. Heracles, with a mighty blow, severed this final, indestructible head. He then buried it deep beneath a massive rock by the side of the road, forever preventing its regrowth. The Hydra was defeated. Before leaving, Heracles dipped his arrows in the Hydra's highly potent, venomous blood, making them instantly lethal. These poisoned arrows would become a terrifying addition to his arsenal, though they would also inadvertently lead to his tragic end much later. As with the Nemean lion, Eurystheus, in his cowardice and petty jealousy, refused to count this labor as valid, claiming Heracles had received help from Iolaus. But Heracles paid him no mind. His focus was on atonement, not the king's feudal rules. The third labor, the Serene hind. Having failed to eliminate Heracles with fearsome beasts, Eurystheus devised a task that required cunning and immense patience rather than brute force. Capture the Serene hind. This was no ordinary deer. It was a magnificent golden-horned stag, sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. It was said to be as swift as the wind, capable of outrunning an arrow, and its hooves were made of bronze. The task was not to kill it, for that would incur the wrath of Artemis, but to capture it alive and bring it back to Mycenae. Eurystheus likely hoped Heracles would either fail to catch it or anger the goddess, leading to his demise. Heracles pursued the hind for an entire year, tracking across vast landscapes, through Arcadia, over mountains and across rivers, never resting, never giving up. The chase was relentless, a testament to Heracles' unyielding persistence. The hind, with its incredible speed, constantly eluded him, driving him to the very limits of his endurance. Finally, after a year of relentless pursuit, Heracles cornered the hind by the river Ladon. In some accounts, he managed to wound it with an arrow, hitting it in the leg without shedding blood, ensuring he didn't defile the sacred creature. In others, he simply wore it out through sheer perseverance. As Heracles was carrying the hind back, he encountered Artemis and her brother Apollo. The goddess was enraged that Heracles had dared to harm her sacred animal. Heracles, however, humbly explained his predicament. He was bound by the will of the gods to the oracle of Delphi and was serving Eurystheus as a penance for his tragic crime. He promised to return the hind unharmed after showing it to Eurystheus. Artemis, recognizing the sincerity of his plea and the weight of his burden, relented and allowed him to proceed. Upon presenting the hind to Eurystheus, the king, ever the petty tyrant, tried to keep the magnificent creature for his own menagerie, but Hercules, with a clever move, pretended to release it, then allowed it to bolt free, telling Eurystheus that if he wanted the hind, he would have to catch it himself. The king, of course, was too cowardly to even try. Hercules had once again triumphed through wit and endurance. The fourth labor, the Erymanthean boar. For his fourth labor, Hercules was sent to capture the terrifying Erymanthean boar, a gigantic and ferocious beast that terrorized the region of Arcadia, ravaging crops and attacking villagers. Unlike the Serene hind, this task did not involve a sacred animal, but rather a dangerous, destructive force of nature that Eurystheus believed would overwhelm Hercules with its sheer ferocity. On his way to Mount Erymanthus, where the boar resided, Hercules encountered a group of centaurs, half-man, half-horse creatures. He was entertained by his friend Pholus, a wise and hospitable centaur, who, despite initial warnings, opened a jar of wine that belonged to the centaurs as a whole. The scent of the wine attracted the other centaurs, who, notorious for their wild and unruly nature when intoxicated, attacked Hercules. A brutal battle ensued. Hercules, forced to defend himself, used his arrows, now tipped with the deadly hydra venom. Many centaurs perished, including Pholus, who accidentally pricked himself with a poisoned arrow while examining one of the fallen. Even Chiron, the wise and immortal centaur who had trained many heroes, was accidentally wounded by Heracles' poisoned arrows during the chaotic fight. The pain from the hydra venom was so immense that Chiron, despite his immortality, eventually chose to exchange his immortality with Prometheus to escape the eternal suffering. This tragic detour highlighted the destructive power Heracles now wielded, a power that could inadvertently harm even innocent. Having dealt with the centaurs, Heracles finally located the Erymanthean boar. Its size and ferocity were indeed formidable. Instead of attempting to kill it outright, Heracles employed a different strategy. He chased the boar relentlessly, driving it deeper and deeper into the thick snow on the mountainside. The boar, exhausted by the strenuous pursuit, eventually collapsed from fatigue. Seizing the opportunity, Heracles used his immense strength to bind the massive beast with chains. He then hoisted it onto his shoulders and carried it all the way back to Mycenae. Upon seeing the monstrous boar, Eurystheus, as expected, was utterly terrified. He quickly scrambled into his bronze jar, pleading with Heracles to take the beast away. Heracles, ever the obedient servant, at least outwardly, simply deposited the struggling boar at Eurystheus' feet. For labors were now complete, each a testament to Heracles' raw power, cunning, and unwavering determination. But the king's demands were far from over, and the trials were only set to become more extraordinary, pushing Heracles to the very limits of what a demigod could endure. With her seemingly impossible labors already behind him, Heracles had proven his unparalleled might and cunning. Yet, King Eurystheus, fueled by Hera's undying malice and his own petty fear, continued to devise tasks that stretched the boundaries of endurance and reason. The challenges ahead would not only test Heracles' physical prowess, but also demand ingenuity, divine assistance, and an unwavering spirit in the face of both the monstrous and the truly repugnant. The next phase of his atonement would see him facing winged terrors, confronting monumental filth, battling a sacred beast, and navigating the treacherous waters of treachery and Amazonian might. The fifth labor, the Stymphalian birds. For his fifth task, Heracles was sent to the region of Arcadia, specifically to the marshlands of Lake Stymphalia. Here, a terrifying flock of birds, known as the Stymphalian birds, had taken root. These were no ordinary avians. They were enormous, man-eating creatures with beaks of bronze, sharp metallic feathers that could be shot like arrows, and claws as strong as steel. They had iron wings and a dye of human flesh, laying waste to the local crops and terrorizing the populace. Their sheer numbers made them a devastating plague. Eurystheus likely hoped that Heracles would be overwhelmed by their sheer multitude or pierced by their deadly feathers. Upon arriving at the marsh, Hercules quickly realized the impossibility of fighting such a vast flock in the dense, boggy terrain. His arrows, though potent, would be useless against so many. The birds roost in the impenetrable swamp, making it impossible to flush them out. It was then that Hercules received a crucial intervention. Athena, ever watchful over her half-brother, descended from Olympus. She presented Hercules with a pair of bronze clappers, a gift from the god Hephaestus, master craftsman of the Olympians. These clappers, when struck together, produce an ear-splitting, unbearable din. Hercules climbed a nearby mountain peak overlooking the lake. With a mighty effort, he clashed the clappers together. The deafening clangor, a sound never before heard by mortal ears, startled the birds into the air in a panic frenzy. As the entire flock rose, disoriented and exposed, Hercules swiftly nocked his hydra-poisoned arrows. With incredible speed and precision, he shot down countless birds as they flew from the marsh, their metallic feathers raining down harmlessly around him. The surviving birds, terrified by the agonizing noise and the sudden slaughter, fled in disarray, never to return to Stymphalia. The region was finally free of their menace. Hercules had cleared the land, not through brute strength alone, but with the aid of divine wisdom and technology. The sixth labor, the Augean stables. Having faced monstrous creatures and winged terrors, Hercules was then given a task designed not for its danger, but for its sheer humiliation and repugnance: clean the Augean stables. King Augeas of Elis, a son of Helios, the sun god, and a fabulously wealthy monarch, owned vast herds of cattle. His stables, housing thousands of oxen, had not been cleaned in over 30 years. The accumulation of dung was colossal, forming mountains of filth that emitted an unbearable stench and spread disease throughout the kingdom. Eurystheus thought this task impossible to complete in a single day and inherently beneath a hero of Hercules' stature. He also stipulated that Hercules must complete alone. Hercules arrived at the stables, contemplating the overwhelming nature of the task. The sheer volume of waste seemed insurmountable, but Hercules, ever resourceful, devised a brilliant plan. Instead of attempting to shovel the dung manually, he sought a more ingenious solution. Near the stables flowed two powerful rivers, the Alpheus and the Punius. Hercules, with his immense strength, diverted the course of both rivers. He dug massive channels and broke through the stable walls, creating a powerful current that surged through the stalls. The rushing waters, with their immense force, swept away decades of accumulated filth in a single day, leaving the stables sparkling clean. When Augeas heard of Hercules' success, he was furious. He had promised Hercules 1/10 of his cattle as payment if the task was completed in a single day. However, upon discovering that Hercules was performing the labor under Eurystheus' command, and when his own son Phyleus testified against him, Augeas reneged on his promise, claiming that Hercules had only succeeded due to the rivers. Eurystheus, predictably, sided with Augeas, refusing to count this labor as valid either, citing Hercules' payment and the use of the rivers as outside help. Despite the unfair ruling and the lack of credit, Hercules had completed the seemingly impossible, cleansing an entire kingdom with his wit and strength. The seventh labor, the Cretan bull. For his seventh labor, Eurystheus commanded Hercules to capture the Cretan bull. This magnificent, snow-white bull was a creature of divine origin, sent by Poseidon as a gift to King Minos of Crete. Minos was supposed to sacrifice the bull to Poseidon, but he found it so beautiful that he kept it and substituted another, lesser bull for the sacrifice. Enraged by this slight, Poseidon cursed the bull, causing it to become wild, rampage across Crete, breathing fire and destroying everything in its path. Eurystheus hoped this fierce, divinely maddened creature would prove too much for Hercules. Hercules journeyed to Crete. Upon arrival, he met King Minos, who, far from opposing Hercules, gladly granted him permission to take the bull. Minos himself had been unable to control the beast and was desperate to rid his island of its destructive presence. Hercules tracked the bull, which was indeed a formidable opponent. It breathed fire, charged with incredible force, and possessed immense strength. The battle was titanic. Hercules wrestled the colossal beast, avoiding its fiery breath and powerful horns. Using his immense strength, he grappled with the bull, subduing it through sheer force and endurance. He grabbed its horns, wrestling it to ground, and finally managed to overpower and tame it. Having brought the bull under his control, Heracles did not kill it. Instead, he rowed it across the Aegean Sea, back to mainland Greece, presenting the magnificent, though now subdued, beast to Eurystheus in Mycenae. Eurystheus, once again terrified by Heracles' trophies, refused to keep the bull. He released it, and the bull wandered into the plain of Marathon, where it continued its rampage, eventually becoming known as the Marathonian bull, later to be slain by Theseus. Heracles' journey to Crete had proven his mastery over even divinely cursed creatures. The eighth labor, the Mares of Diomedes. Eurystheus next to Greece and Heracles of Thrace, to confront a truly barbaric challenge: capture the Mares of Diomedes. Diomedes, a brutal king of the Bistones in Thrace, was the son of Ares, the god of war. He owned 4 Mares, Podargos, Lampon, Xanthos, and Deinos, who were not only wild and untamed but were also fed on human flesh. Diomedes would tie unsuspecting strangers to troughs, allowing his Mares to devour them, a horrific practice that spread terror throughout the region. Eurystheus' task was to bring these man-eating horses back to Mycenae, a feat of extreme danger. Heracles arrived in Thrace, prepared for a bloody confrontation. He initially attempted to simply steal the Mares, but their ferocity and the resistance of Diomedes' men made this impossible. A battle ensued, and Heracles' rage killed Diomedes himself. In a grim act of poetic justice, Heracles fed the tyrant's body to his own Mares. The Mares, having tasted their master's flesh, became subdued. With their monstrous diet of human flesh satisfied by their former master, they became calm enough for Heracles to lead them back to Eurystheus. However, the Mares of Diomedes remained wild and untamable by ordinary means. When Heracles brought them to Mycenae, Eurystheus, once again fearing the dangerous beasts, released them onto Mount Olympus. Here, they were ultimately devoured by wild animals, or, in some versions, killed by wolves, their monstrous lineage finally brought to an end. This labor showcased Heracles' willingness to confront the truly abhorrent and his ability to subdue even the most savage of creatures, often by turning their own cruelty against them. The middle section of Heracles' labors was proving to be a grueling test of both his physical might and his moral fortitude, forcing him to confront not just monsters, but the monstrous acts of humanity itself. The final trials would take him even further, to the very edges of the known world and beyond. Heracles had conquered beasts, cleansed kingdoms, and outwitted both gods and men. He had faced the mundane and the monstrous, always with the crushing weight of his atonement driving him forward. Yet, King Eurystheus, ever inventive in his malice, saved the most daunting tasks for last. These remaining labors would take Heracles to the very ends of the known world, testing not just his physical might, but his very understanding of the cosmic order, ultimately leading him to the gates of the underworld itself. The 9th labor, the girdle of Hippolyta. Though briefly mentioned in the Part 3 outline, its placement often marks the start of Heracles' more distant and significant journeys. So a brief recap and expansion here is fitting for Travel's theme of Part 4, ensuring depth without repeating too much. Heracles' 9th labor took him far from Greece, to the distant land of Themyscira, the home of the Amazons. These were fierce warrior women, unparalleled in battle, who lived in a matriarchal society. Their queen, Hippolyta, possessed a magnificent golden girdle, a gift from her father, Ares, the god of war. Admeta, the daughter of King Eurystheus, coveted this girdle, and so Eurystheus commanded Heracles to retrieve it. This was a complex task, as it involved dealing not with beasts, but with an entire nation of formidable women, whose prowess was legendary. Heracles arrived at Themyscira, initially intending to approach them peacefully. Hippolyta, impressed by Heracles' reputation and strength, and perhaps even charmed by his noble bearing, was willing to grant him the girdle willingly. A peaceful exchange seemed possible. However, Hera, ever watchful and insidious, disguised herself as an Amazonian warrior. She spread rumors among the Amazons that Heracles intended to abduct their queen and enslave them all. This false accusation ignited the Amazons' fury. Believing themselves betrayed, they launched a ferocious attack against Heracles and his companions. A brutal battle ensued. Hercules, forced to defend himself, fought valiantly against the Amazonian warriors. Though many Amazons fell, Hercules did not delight in the bloodshed. In the chaos of the battle, believing that Hippolyta herself had betrayed him by instigating the attack, he tragically killed her and took the girdle by force. The battle subsided, leaving a trail of sorrow and misunderstanding. Hercules, bearing the splendid girdle, returned to Eurystheus, having fulfilled yet another demanding task, but not without further adding to the grim tally of his life's tragedies. This labor emphasized that even when good will seem possible, Hera's interference could turn peace into sorrow and misunderstanding into bloodshed. The 10th labor, the cattle of Geryon. For his 10th labor, Hercules was sent on his most arduous journey yet, to the very edge of the Western world, to the island of Erythea, meaning Red Island. His task, to obtain the cattle of Geryon. Geryon was a monstrous, 3-bodied giant, a formidable warrior, who guarded his magnificent herd of red cattle with the aid of a 2-headed dog named Orthrus, brother of Cerberus, and a giant herdsman named Eurytion. The journey itself was a labor, requiring Hercules to traverse vast distances and overcome formidable obstacles. To reach Erythea, Hercules had to cross the scorching Libyan desert. Frustrated by the oppressive heat, he aimed an arrow at Helios, the sun god. Impressed by Hercules' audacity, Helios, rather than punishing him, lent him his golden cup, a magnificent vessel that served as a boat, allowing Hercules to sail safely across the vast ocean to Erythea. This divine aid was crucial for the immense journey. Upon reaching the island, Hercules swiftly dispatched Orthrus, the 2-headed dog, and then Eurytion, the herdsman. Finally, he confronted Geryon himself. The 3-bodied giant proved a formidable opponent, but Hercules, with his unparalleled strength and his deadly hydropoison arrows, overwhelmed him, killing the monster. The difficulty now lay in driving the vast herd of cattle all the way back to Mycenae, a journey that spanned continents and faced numerous challenges. Along the way, he battled various obstacles, hostile tribes, storms, and even Hera herself, who sent a gadfly to madden the cattle, scattering them across the land. Hercules tirelessly gathered them, proving his persistence and resilience. He built several monuments along his route, most notably the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, marking the boundaries of the then-known world. Finally, after a grueling journey, he delivered the cattle to Eurystheus, who promptly sacrificed them to Hera. This labor took Hercules farther than he had ever traveled, pushing the limits of geographical endurance and marking him as a truly global hero. The 11th labor, the apples of the Hesperides. Eurystheus' penultimate demand was to retrieve the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. These were no ordinary apples. They were sacred, golden fruits that granted immortality and grew on a tree given by Gaia, Mother Earth, to Hera as a wedding gift. The garden was located in the mythical far west, beyond the reach of mortals, and guarded by the Hesperides, nymphs who were daughters of Atlas, and by a terrifying, 100-headed serpent named Ladon, who never slept. This was a task shrouded in mystery, requiring knowledge of the world's hidden secrets. Hercules embarked on another epic journey, seeking knowledge of the garden's location. He first encountered Nereus, the old man of the sea, who could change his form. Hercules wrestled him until Nereus, tired of the struggle, revealed the path. In some versions of the myth, during his journey, Hercules freed Prometheus, who was chained to a rock for giving fire to humanity. In gratitude, Prometheus advised Hercules not to pluck the apples himself, but to use Atlas, the titan who held the heavens on his shoulders, to retrieve them. Following Prometheus' advice, Hercules journeyed to where Atlas stood. He proposed a deal. If Atlas would fetch the apples from his daughter's garden, Hercules would temporarily take on the burden of holding the sky. Atlas, weary from his eternal punishment, agreed. Hercules, with immense effort, took the weight of the heavens upon his broad shoulders. Atlas returned with the golden apples, but, enjoying his newfound freedom, tried to trick Hercules into holding the sky forever. He offered to deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself. Hercules, seeing through the deception, feigned agreement, but asked Atlas to momentarily take the sky back so he could adjust his lion skin padding. As soon as Atlas took the heavens, Hercules seized the apples and swiftly departed. In other versions, Hercules simply slew Ladon and took the apples himself. Regardless of the method, the golden apples were brought to Eurystheus, who, unsure what to do with the mortal fruit, returned them to Hercules. Athena then took them back to the Garden of the Hesperides, where they belonged, restoring the natural order. This labor symbolized Heracles' wisdom and resourcefulness, capable of outsmarting even the cunning Titans. The 12th and final labor, Cerberus. The final labor, the culmination of Heracles' atonement, was the most terrifying of all. Brings Cerberus, the three-headed hound of Hades, back from the underworld. This was a task that directly challenged the king of the dead, a feat of such impossibility that Eurystheus believed it would finally lead to Heracles' certain demise. No living mortal was meant to enter the realm of the dead and return. Before descending into the underworld, Heracles needed to be purified of his past bloodshed and initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, a sacred rite that would grant him safe passage and knowledge of the afterlife. Accompanied by Hermes and Athena, his divine protectors, Heracles journeyed to the entrance of the underworld, often described as a dark chasm or a cave. He navigated the terrifying landscape of the dead, witnessing the suffering of the damned and the vastness of Hades' realm. Upon reaching the palace of Hades, Heracles fearlessly presented his request to the king of the underworld himself. Hades, lord of the dead, agreed to let Heracles take Cerberus, but only on one condition. Heracles must subdue the beast using only his bare hands, without any weapons. The confrontation with Cerberus was epic. The colossal hound, with its three snarling heads, venomous breath, and serpentine tail, was a fearsome guardian. Heracles grappled with the monster, dodging its snapping jaws and powerful blows. With his immense strength, he managed to wrap his arms around the beast's neck, squeezing it with an unbreakable grip, slowly choking the life out of it until Cerberus, gasping for air, finally succumbed. He then led the subdued Cerberus, surprisingly docile in his presence, up to the world of the living. The sight of Cerberus terrified Eurystheus beyond measure. He leapt into his bronze jar, screaming at Heracles to take the beast away. Heracles complied, releasing Cerberus back to the underworld, restoring order to the realm of the dead. With this final, unimaginable feat, the 12 labors were complete. Heracles had faced death itself and emerged victorious. The aftermath, redemption, and apotheosis. Having completed the 12 labors, Heracles was finally free from his servitude to Eurystheus and cleansed of his terrible crime. His penance was served, his spirit purified. He went on to have many more adventures, fought in the Gigantomachy alongside the gods, and continued to demonstrate his incredible strength and heroism. However, his life was not without further tragedy and suffering, still touched by Hera's lingering malice. He eventually married Diana, who unknowingly caused his death using a poison cloak, believing it to be a love charm. The poison, from the blood of the centaur Nessus, whom Heracles had slain with a hydra-poison arrow years before, burned him from within. Unable to bear the excruciating pain, Heracles built his own funeral pyre on Mount Ida. As his mortal body burned, his divine essence, the part of him that was truly Zeus' son, ascended to Mount Olympus. There, he was welcomed by the Olympian gods. Hera, finally putting aside her ancient grudge, reconciled with him, and Heracles was granted immortality. He became a god, taking Hebe, the goddess of youth and cupbearer to the gods, as his divine bride. Heracles, the son of Zeus and Alcmene, the tormented hero, the strongest of mortals, had transcended his earthly suffering. His journey, marked by tragedy and incredible feats, culminated in his rightful place among the Olympians, a shining example of strength, endurance, and ultimately redemption. His legend, born of suffering and forged in impossible trials, would echo through eternity. In the vast tapestry of Greek mythology, where gods meddle in mortal affairs and heroes are forged in the crucible of prophecy and war, few figures loom as large or as tragically as Achilles. His very name became synonymous with unparalleled martial prowess, unyielding will, and a destiny that would, for a brief, glorious period, define the very course of history. But before the plains of Troy knew his rage, Before kings trembled at his might, Achilles was born at a union both divine and mortal, marked by a prophecy that would forever bind his life to the grandest conflict of his age. Our story begins not with a clash of swords, but with a celestial wedding. The bride was Thetis, a beautiful and powerful sea nymph, a daughter of the ancient sea god Nereus. The groom was Peleus, a respected king of Phthia and Thessaly, a mortal hero in his own right, though overshadowed by his divine spouse. Their marriage was orchestrated by none other than Zeus himself, for a momentous prophecy hung over Thetis. Any son she bore would be greater than his father. Feared that such a son could one enormous day overthrow him, Zeus ensured Thetis would marry a mortal man, thus limiting the potential threat to his reign. The wedding was a grand affair, attended by all the Olympian gods, a rare moment of unity and celebration. Yet, even amid such joy, the seeds of future sorrow were sown, for it was at this very wedding that Eris, the goddess of discord, cast down the golden apple of discord, igniting the chain of events that would ultimately lead to the Trojan War. From this extraordinary union, a son was born, Achilles. His birth, however, was immediately overshadowed by his mother's desperate attempts to defy the grim prophecy that clung to him. The fates had decreed that Achilles would either live a long, obscure life or a short, glorious one. Thetis, wishing for her son to escape the clutches of mortality and the brevity of a heroic life, took desperate measures. In the most famous account, she held the infant Achilles by his heel and dipped him into the sacred waters of the river Styx, the boundary between the living world and the underworld. The mystical waters were said to confer invulnerability, washing away all mortal weakness. Every part of Achilles' body that was touched by the Styx became impervious to harm, as strong as the gods themselves. Every part, that is, except for the tiny heel by which his mother held him. This single, vulnerable spot, a cruel irony of his mother's desperate love, would become his ultimate undoing, forever known as his Achilles' heel. In another, older tradition, Thetis would secretly burn away Achilles' mortal parts in a sacred fire each night, an alchemical process of purification meant to bestow immortality. One night, Peleus awoke and, horrified by the sight of his wife placing their son into the flames, cried out. Thetis, startled, dropped the infant and fled, abandoning both husband and son. In this version, it was still Achilles' heel, unburnt, that remained vulnerable, regardless of the method. The result was the same. Achilles was almost godlike, invulnerable save for one critical weakness, a destiny sealed by his mother's choices. As Achilles grew, his extraordinary nature became evident. His strength, speed, and innate grace were unmatched. To nurture his prodigious talents, Peleus entrusted his son to the care of Chiron, the wise and benevolent centaur. Chiron, unlike his wild brethren, was a legendary teacher, having mentored many of Greece's greatest heroes, including Jason, Asclepius, and Hercules himself. Under Chiron's tutelage on Mount Pelion, Achilles received an unparalleled education. He learned the arts of warfare, archery, spear throwing, wrestling, and the strategic complexities of battle. But Chiron's teachings extended beyond mere combat. He instructed Achilles in the healing arts and music. The lyre became one of Achilles' few comforts, in philosophy and in the intricate ways of the natural world. Achilles grew into a fierce warrior, yes, but also a cultured and contemplative young man, capable of deep emotion, profound thought, a duality that would define his tragic existence. While Achilles honed his skills in the serene wilds of Mount Pelion, far away, the seeds of a monumental conflict were being sown. The spark was struck at the very wedding of Peleus and Thetis, when Eris, the goddess of discord, threw her golden apple, inscribed to the fairest among the goddesses. This led to the fateful judgment of Paris, where the Trojan prince chose Aphrodite as the fairest goddess in exchange for the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta, wife of King Menelaus. Paris's subsequent abduction of Helen ignited the fury of the Greek kings, chief among them Menelaus and his powerful brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. A grand alliance was formed, binding all the major Greek kingdoms by ancient oaths to reclaim Helen and punish Troy. As the mighty Achaean Greek fleet began to gather, a chilling prophecy emerged regarding Achilles. It was foretold that Troy could not fall without his participation, and that his presence was absolutely essential for the Greek victory. However, the same prophecy also stated that if Achilles went to Troy, he would surely die a glorious, but tragically short life. His mother, Thetis, knowing this grim fate, was desperate to save her beloved son. She spirited him away to the island of Scyros, to the court of King Lycomedes, and disguised him as a girl, hiding him among the king's daughters under the name Pyrrha, the red-haired one. She hoped that by concealing him, he could live a long, obscure life, safe from the brutal realities of war. But the Achaean forces, stalled at Aulis by unfavorable winds, needed Achilles. The prophet Calchas revealed that the expedition could not succeed without him. Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca, and Diomedes, the valiant king of Argos, were dispatched to Scyros to find him. Odysseus, known for his shrewdness, suspected the disguise. He brought gifts to the court, jewels, fine clothes for princesses, but also subtly placed among them a sword, a shield, and a trumpet. While the girls marveled at the trinkets, Odysseus suddenly sounded the trumpet, mimicking a war alarm. In an instant, Achilles, reacting instinctively to the call to battle, cast off his disguise and seized the weapons, betraying his true identity. His fate was sealed. With Achilles now revealed, there was no turning back. He joined the assembled Achaean forces at Aulis, bringing with him his elite contingent of warriors, the Myrmidons, fierce and loyal fighters from his kingdom of Phthia. The greatest army the Greek world had ever seen was now complete, comprising legendary heroes like Ajax the Greater, Odysseus, Diomedes, and the venerable Nestor. A vast fleet of 1,000 ships prepared to sail, their sails unfurling towards the distant shores of Troy. Achilles, though destined for glory, marched toward a fate he knew would be both dazzling and tragically brief, unaware of the bitter quarrels and profound losses that awaited him on the besieged plains of Ilium. The stage was set for the greatest epic poem ever told, and Achilles, the unwilling instrument of destiny, would soon unleash his unparalleled might upon the Trojan walls. The vast Achaean fleet, bearing the flower of Greek heroism, finally reached the shores of Troy. After a grueling 9-year siege, marked by skirmishes and minor campaigns rather than decisive battles, the stage was truly set for the epic confrontations that would define this war. Among the myriad heroes, one figure quickly rose above all others, a beacon of terrifying power and unmatched skill: Achilles, the swift-footed son of Thetis. Upon landing on the Trojan shore, it was Protesilaus, the first Greek to leap from his ship, who fell, fulfilling a grim prophecy. But quickly, the might of the Achaeans, led by their greatest warriors, established a foothold. The Trojans, O brave, were soon besieged within their formidable city walls. The war, however, was not confined to direct assaults on Troy itself. For 9 long years, the Achaeans launched numerous raids against neighboring cities and islands allied with Troy. These campaigns served multiple purposes: to gather supplies, secure strategic positions, and accumulate plunder to sustain the massive army. It was in these skirmishes and sieges that Achilles truly shone, forging his legend with every swing of his sword. His Myrmidons, fierce and loyal, followed him into every battle, an unstoppable force. Achilles led expeditions against cities like Lyrnessus, Pedasus, and the island of Lesbos. In these raids, he displayed not only his incredible prowess in direct combat, but also his strategic acumen. He captured countless prisoners, amassed vast amount of treasure, and earned a fearsome reputation that struck terror into the hearts of the Trojans and their allies. Indeed, it was said that wherever Achilles fought, victory was assured. He slew numerous minor heroes, even challenging and defeating the Amazon queen Penthesilea and the Ethiopian king Memnon, allies who came to Troy's aid in later stages of the war. His name became a byword for destruction among the Trojans, a living embodiment of their impending doom. Among the spoils of these conquests were women, captured as prizes of war. In the sack of Lyrnessus, Achilles took a beautiful woman named Briseis, who became his beloved concubine. She was a woman of noble birth, gentle and kind, and Achilles developed a genuine affection for her. Meanwhile, Agamemnon, the arrogant commander-in-chief of the Achaean forces, claimed Chryses, the daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo, as his own prize from the city of Thebe. But Agamemnon's arrogance was as boundless as his ambition. When Chryses, the priest, came to the Achaean camp bearing a rich ransom and humbly pleading for return of his daughter, Agamemnon rudely dismissed him, threatening the old man and boasting of his capture. The priest, heartbroken and insulted, prayed to his patron god, Apollo, the Olympian god of archery and plague. Enraged by the disrespect shown to his priest, descended from Olympus in a cloud of pestilence. For 9 days, Apollo rained down arrows of plague upon the Achaean camp, unleashing a devastating epidemic that decimated the Greek ranks. Pyres burned constantly, carrying the dead to the heavens, and the Greeks suffered immensely. On the 10th day, driven by desperation, Achilles convened an assembly of the Achaean leaders. He called upon Calchas, the prophet, to reveal the cause of Apollo's wrath. Calchas, protected by Achilles' promise of defense against anyone who might resent his prophecy, revealed the truth. Apollo's anger stemmed from Agamemnon's disrespect towards his priest and his refusal to release Chryses. Calchas declared that the plague would only cease if Chryses was returned to her father without ransom. This revelation ignited a furious public quarrel, the likes of which had never been seen between the Achaean kings. Agamemnon, his face contorted with rage, reluctantly agreed to return Chryses, but not without demanding a replacement prize, a compensatory woman to uphold his honor. His eyes fell upon Briseis, Achilles' beloved concubine. "Since you have stripped me of my prize," Agamemnon declared, "I shall take yours. I shall go in person to your hut and take the fair cheek Briseis, so that you will learn that I am your master." Achilles was incensed. His face burned with a mixture of righteous fury and profound insult. He felt utterly dishonored, his most prized possession, a symbol of his affection and conquest, being torn from him by the very commander he served. He drew his sword, on the verge of striking Agamemnon down then and there, ready to spill royal blood. But at that critical moment, Athena, sent by Hera, appeared to Achilles alone, unseen by the others. She seized his golden hair and whispered to him, urging him to restrain his hand, promising that Agamemnon would pay a threefold price for this insult in due time. Achilles, recognizing the goddess, reluctantly obeyed, thrusting his sword back into its scabbard. In a fit of indignant rage, Achilles publicly declared his withdrawal from the fighting. "I will not fight," he swore, "not until Agamemnon grovels before me and begs me to return to battle." He vowed that he and his mighty Myrmidons would take no further part in the war, standing idle while the other Greeks fought and died. This was not a mere tantrum. It was a devastating blow to the Achaean war effort. Achilles returned to his ships, accompanied by Patroclus, his dearest companion, as Agamemnon's heralds came and took Briseis away. Achilles wept tears of anger and frustration, praying to his mother Thetis to intercede with Zeus, urging the king of the gods to allow the Trojans to gain the upper hand, to make the Achaeans suffer terribly, so that Agamemnon would realize the profound mistake he had made in dishonoring the greatest of their warriors. True to Achilles' prayer and Zeus's eventual intervention, the tide of the war began to turn disastrously for the Achaeans. Without Achilles, the Greek lines faltered. Hector, the mighty Trojan prince and their greatest champion, seized the opportunity. He rallied the Trojan forces, driving the Greeks from the plains, pushing them back relentlessly towards their fortified camp and their ships on the beach. Day after day, the Trojans gained ground, inflicting heavy casualties. The Greek leaders, including Odysseus, Diomedes, and the two Ajaxes, fought bravely, but their efforts were not enough to stem the overwhelming Trojan assault. The flames of Trojan victory crept ever closer to the Greek ships, threatening to burn their entire fleet and trap them on the shore. Agamemnon, witnessing the devastation, quickly regretted his foolish pride. He sent a delegation to Achilles, offering immense gifts, gold, tripods, horses, 20 Trojan women, and even the return of Briseis, untouched, along with 7 other captive women, and promises of future wealth and power. But Achilles, his pride deeply wounded, remained unyielding. He rejected Agamemnon's lavish offer, his anger too profound, his sense of dishonor too great. He stated that he would not return to battle until Hector reached his own ships and fires threatened to consume them. The Achaeans were left to face their doom, their greatest hero sitting idle, nursing his wrath. While the war raged on, escalating toward a climax that would demand an unbearable sacrifice and unleash a fury unlike any the world had ever seen. The cost of pride, both mortal and divine, was mounting with every fallen Greek warrior. As Achilles nursed his wounded pride by his ships, the war for Troy raged on, and the Achaean forces found themselves pushed to the brink of annihilation. Without the invincible might of Achilles and his Myrmidons, the tide had turned decisively in favor of the Trojans. Hector, emboldened by the absence of his fiercest adversary and seemingly blessed by Zeus, fought with unparalleled ferocity. He drove the Greeks back, first in the open plains, then into their fortified camp, and finally to the very edge of the beach where their ships lay beached. The Trojans, with burning torches and unbridled resolve, threatened to set the entire Achaean fleet ablaze, trapping the Greeks and sealing their doom. The air was thick with the dust of battle and the cries of the dying. The greatest heroes of the Achaeans, mighty Ajax, cunning Odysseus, and the courageous Diomedes, fought with desperate valor, forming a desperate shield wall to protect their vessels. But their efforts seemed futile against the relentless onslaught led by Hector, who seemed to wield the very hand of destiny. Greek ships were already beginning to catch fire, casting an ominous glow on the desperate faces of the warriors. The sight was unbearable for many, none more so than for Patroclus, Achilles' dearest companion, his childhood friend, and his closest confidant. Patroclus, seeing the desperate plight of his countrymen, could no longer bear to stand idle. He approached Achilles, his eyes filled with tears and his heart heavy with despair. He pleaded with his friend, not for himself, but for the dying Achaeans. He reminded Achilles of the vast suffering, the mounting losses, and the impending defeat that would befall their army if it continued to withdraw. "If your heart is turned by some prophecy," Patroclus implored, "or some word from Zeus holds you back, then at least let me go. Let me lead the Myrmidons into battle, and let me wear your armor, so that the Trojans, seeing your panoply, might think you have returned and recoil in fear, giving the suffering Greeks a moment of respite." Achilles, his heart still hardened by pride, listened. He still refused to fight himself, but the sight of Patroclus' genuine sorrow and the dire situation of his comrades finally moved him. He relented to Patroclus' desperate plea, granting him permission to lead the Myrmidons into battle, but with strict instructions. "Go, my friend," Achilles commanded. "Drive the Trojans from the ships, relieve the pressure, but do not pursue them beyond the wall. Do not let your glory overcome you and draw you to Troy itself, for that would invite utter ruin." He even lent Patroclus his magnificent, gleaming armor, a panoply that instilled fear in the hearts of Trojans and hope in the hearts of Greeks. With Achilles' formidable armor gleaming under the sun and ferocious Myrmidons at his back, Patroclus burst onto the battlefield. The sight of Achilles' armor sent a wave of terror through the Trojan ranks. Believing Achilles himself had returned, they broke formation and fled in panic from the ships. Patroclus, fighting with an almost superhuman frenzy, reminiscent of Achilles himself, cut down countless Trojans. He drove them from the ships, extinguished the fires, and pushed them back towards the city walls, inflicting heavy casualties and momentarily turning the tide of the war. His valor was immense, and he brought renewed hope to the beleaguered Achaeans. He even slew Sarpedon, a son of Zeus and a mighty Trojan ally, a feat that deeply angered the king of the gods. However, Patroclus' glory was tragically short-lived, and his zeal led him beyond Achilles' warning. Carried away by his success, he pursued the fleeing Trojans too close to the walls of Troy. Here, his fatal encounter awaited him. First, Apollo, the very god who had sent the plague upon the Achaeans due to Agamemnon's slight, intervened. He struck Patroclus from behind, blurring his vision, loosening his armor and weakening his limbs. Then Euphorbus, a Trojan warrior, wounded him with a spear. Finally, Hector, the greatest champion of Troy, delivered the killing blow, a spear through Patroclus' stomach. As Patroclus lay dying, Hector boasted over him, taking Achilles' armor from his fallen body. Patroclus, with his dying breath, prophesied Hector's own impending death at Achilles' hands. The news of Patroclus' death reached Achilles like a thunderbolt, shattering the last vestiges of his composure. Antilochus, Nestor's son, brought the grim tidings. Achilles, upon hearing the news, let out a terrible cry of anguish, a sound that resonated across the battlefield and reached the very heavens. He threw himself into the dust, tearing at his hair, covering his face with ashes, consumed by a grief so profound it bordered on madness. His body shook with uncontrollable sobs and a burgeoning, terrifying rage. The loss of Patroclus, his soulmate, his companion, the very reason for his current inaction, broke him. His pride, his anger at Agamemnon, all seemed insignificant now. The only thing that mattered was vengeance. His mother, Thetis, heard his cries from the depths of the sea. She emerged from the waves, heartbroken by her son's despair. Achilles declared his intention to return to battle and exact vengeance on Hector, even if it meant fulfilling his own prophecy of short life. "Let me die at once," he cried, "since I could not save my friend." Thetis, seeing his resolve, knew she could not dissuade him. Instead, she promised to obtain new armor for him. She ascended to Mount Olympus and pleaded with Hephaestus, the divine smith, to forge a new set of arms, armor worthy of the greatest hero, to replace what Hector had stripped from Patroclus. Hephaestus, in his celestial forge, created a magnificent panoply. The greaves, the breastplate, the helmet, all gleamed with divine artistry. But it was a shield that truly stood apart, a masterpiece of cosmic creation. Upon its vast, circular surface, Hephaestus intricately depicted the entire cosmos. The heavens and the earth, the sun, moon, and stars, two cities, one at peace, celebrating a wedding, and one at war besieged. He portrayed scenes of daily life, farming, feasting, dancing, and the grim realities of justice and battle. This shield was not merely protection. It was a symbol of the world Achilles fought for, a poignant contrast to the singular focus of his impending fury. Clad in this radiant, divinely crafted armor, Achilles emerged from his ships, a terrifying vision of vengeful might. His mere presence on the battlefield, after so long an absence, sent shivers of dread through the Trojan ranks and ignited a spark of hope in the hearts of the Achaeans. He called an assembly, publicly reconciling with Agamemnon, accepting the gifts he had once refused, and most importantly, accepting Briseis back, though her return was now secondary to his burning desire for revenge. Agamemnon, humbled by the immense losses and Achilles' imminent return, made a public apology. Achilles wasted no time. He immediately plunged into the fray, a whirlwind of destruction. His fury was a palpable force, eclipsing all others on the battlefield. He cut down Trojans indiscriminately, his spear and sword moving with a terrifying speed and precision. The river's commander, choked to the bodies of the slain, rose in protest, threatening to drown him, forcing Achilles to fight even the very gods of the river. He was a force of nature, a god of war unleashed, driven by a singular, all-consuming desire to find Hector and exact the ultimate price for Patroclus' death. The plains of Troy now awaited the inevitable, fatal confrontation between the mightiest of the Achaeans and the greatest champion of Troy, a duel destined to decide not only the fate of two heroes, but an entire civilization. Clad in his magnificent, divinely forged armor, Achilles had returned to the battlefield not as a warrior, but as an avenging fury. His rage, a consuming inferno, eclipsed all else. He cared not for the fate of Troy, nor the honor of the Achaeans. His sole, unwavering purpose was to find Hector, the slayer of his beloved Patroclus, and exact a terrible, definitive vengeance. The very air around him crackled with his boundless wrath, and the Trojans, who had dared to push the Greeks to the brink, now scattered before him like chaff before a storm. Achilles carved a bloody path through the Trojan ranks, ignoring all others, his eyes fixed on one target. The Trojans retreated in disarray, pouring back into their city, seeking the safety of its towering walls. Only Hector, the great champion of Troy, remained outside, defying the pleas of his parents, King Priam and Queen Hecuba, who begged him from the ramparts to seek refuge within the city. But Hector, burdened by honor and the knowledge of his past choices, chose to face Achilles alone outside the Scaean gates, ready to defend his city and his reputation. Even against the inevitable, the stage was set for the most legendary duel in all of Greek mythology. Achilles, radiating an almost divine aura of vengeance, charged. Hector, initially courageous, found his resolve wavering at the sheer, terrifying presence of Achilles. He fled, and Achilles, swift-footed as he was, pursued him relentlessly, 3 times they circled the massive walls of Troy, a desperate race between hunter and hunted, witnessed by gods and mortals alike. Zeus on Olympus even weighed their fates on his golden scales, and Hector's destiny sank, marking him for death. It was during this desperate pursuit that divine intervention twisted the scales of fate. Athena, disguised as Deiphobus, Hector's beloved brother, appeared beside Hector, offering him false courage and urging him to stand and fight. Believing he was not alone, Hector finally turned to face Achilles. The duel was swift and brutal. Hector hurled his spear, but Achilles' new shield, divinely crafted, turned aside. Achilles in return to throw, his spear piercing Hector's throat, just below the collarbone, a mortal spot left unprotected by Achilles' own former armor, which Hector now wore. As Hector lay dying, he pleaded with Achilles to return his body to his parents for proper burial, but Achilles, consumed by his grief and rage for Patroclus, refused, vowing to leave Hector's corpse to dogs and vultures. With Hector dead, Achilles' vengeance was not yet satisfied. In a barbaric act that shocked even the gods, Achilles pierced Hector's ankles, threaded ropes through them, and tied the body to his chariot. He then dragged Hector's corpse around the walls of Troy, in full view of the mourning Trojans, desecrating the fallen hero's body in a grotesque display of triumph and unrelenting fury. This act, fueled by an almost inhuman grief, was a testament to the tragic depths of Achilles' wrath, a stain on his otherwise glorious reputation. He continued this ritual for days, dragging Hector's body around Patroclus' tomb until the gods themselves intervened. Apollo, disgusted by the desecration, kept Hector's body from decaying. The gods, particularly Zeus, finally commanded Achilles to return Hector's body. And so, under the cover of night, guided and protected by Hermes, the aged King Priam, Hector's father, made a courageous and heartbreaking journey to the Achaean camp. He entered Achilles' tent, a desperate old man kneeling before the slayer of his son. Priam appealed to Achilles' humanity, invoking the memory of Achilles' own father, Peleus, and begging for the return of his son's body. He kissed Achilles' hands, the very hands that had taken his son's life. In that profound moment, a flicker of Achilles' earlier humanity, cultivated by Chiron, resurfaced. The sheer raw grief of Priam, reminiscent of his own for Patroclus, touched Achilles' hardened heart. Tears flowed freely from both men, weeping for their lost loved ones. Achilles, finally overcome by empathy and a realization of the shared human condition, returned Hector's body, allowing Priam to take it back to Troy for a proper funeral. This act of compassion, after such prolonged and brutal display of vengeance, revealed the complex depths of Achilles' character, a warrior capable of both savage cruelty and profound tenderness. A 12-day truce was agreed upon for Hector's funeral rites, bringing a brief, somber peace to the war-torn plains. With Hector dead, Troy's greatest offender was gone, but the city still stood, protected by its formidable walls. Achilles continued to fight, his legend growing with every encounter. However, the prophecy that had shadowed his entire life now drew near its fulfillment. It was not in a grand climactic battle with a mighty warrior that Achilles would fall, but by a seemingly ignoble hand, guided by a vengeful god. As the war progressed, nearing its 10th year, Achilles engaged the Trojans near the Scaean gates. Paris, Hector's less valorous brother, armed with a bow, lurked on the ramparts. Apollo, the very god whose priest Agamemnon had offended at the war's beginning, and who played a part in Patroclus' death, harbored a grudge against Achilles. Taking the form of a cloud or simply guiding the arrow with divine precision, Apollo directed Paris' arrow. The arrow, flying true, struck Achilles in a single vulnerable spot, his heel, the only place untouched by the river Styx. The only part of him that was truly mortal was now pierced. The wound, though small, was fatal. The greatest warrior of the Greeks, the near-invincible Achilles, fell, brought down by a seemingly insignificant wound, fulfilling the grim prophecy that had haunted him since birth. A fierce battle erupted over Achilles' body. The Achaeans, led by the mighty Ajax the Greater and the cunning Odysseus, fought desperately to retrieve his corpse from the Trojans. After a brutal struggle, they succeeded, carrying his body back to the Greek camp. Achilles' funeral was a grand, mournful affair attended by all the Greeks and even by the Nereids, his mother's sisters, who wept with Thetis. His ashes were mixed with those of Patroclus, a final union of their inseparable souls. Following the funeral, a dispute arose over Achilles' magnificent armor, the very armor forged by Hephaestus. Both Ajax the Greater, Achilles' cousin and a formidable warrior, and Odysseus, known for his wisdom and cunning, claimed it. A council of the Achaean leaders, or in some accounts, the captive Trojans, was tasked with deciding. Ultimately, the armor was awarded to Odysseus, a decision that drove Ajax to madness, leading to his tragic suicide. This final quarrel among the Greeks over Achilles' legacy highlighted the enduring impact of his life and death. Achilles' story is the quintessential Greek tragedy. He chose a short, glorious life over a long, obscure one, fulfilling his destiny as the greatest warrior of his age. His life was a whirlwind of extraordinary power, unmatched skill, and profound emotion. He embodied the Greek ideal of Aristia, excellence in battle, but also demonstrated the devastating cost of hubris and uncontrolled rage. His vulnerability, both physical and emotional, made him relatable despite his divine gifts. His legend, passed down through Homer's epic verses and countless retellings, cemented his place not just as a hero of antiquity, but as an eternal symbol of strength, tragic flaw, and the relentless march of fate. The war for Troy would eventually end with cunning, not direct battle, but it was Achilles, the demigod warrior, whose individual saga formed its beating, tragic heart. In the age of heroes, when the gods still walked among mortals and destiny was woven into the very fabric of existence, there unfolded a saga of unparalleled adventure, a quest for a treasure shrouded in myth and guarded by ancient magic. This is the story of Jason, the Argonauts, a tale of a rightful king reclaiming his throne, a perilous voyage across unknown seas, and the gathering of the greatest heroes Greece had ever known. Their journey would define an era, battling monsters, outwitting tyrants, and confronting the very limits of human courage. Our narrative begins in the prosperous kingdom of Iolcus in Thessaly. Its legitimate ruler, King Eson, faced a tragic fate. His ambitious and ruthless half-brother, Peleus, driven by an insatiable lust for power, usurped the throne, imprisoning Eson and intending to kill his infant son Jason to secure his illegitimate reign. However, Eson's loyal supporters managed to smuggle the young prince out of the city. To ensure his safety and proper upbringing, the infant Jason was entrusted to the care of Chiron, the wise and benevolent centaur. Chiron's sanctuary on Mount Pelion was a renowned academy for heroes, a place where the sons of gods and kings receive an unparalleled education. Alongside future legends like Achilles, whom we have previously explored, Hercules, Asclepius, and Actaeon, Jason was trained in all the arts befitting a prince and a hero. He learned martial skills, wielding sword and spear, wrestling, archery, becoming strong and agile. But Chiron also instilled in him wisdom, justice, music, and the healing arts, shaping Jason into a thoughtful and compassionate leader, not merely a warrior. For 20 years, Jason lived in this peaceful, enlightened retreat, unaware of his true heritage, yet being meticulously prepared for a destiny that awaited him in Iolcus. Meanwhile, back in Iolcus, King Peleus, though secure on his stolen throne, was tormented by a chilling prophecy. An oracle had warned him to beware the man with but one sandal, for such a man would be his undoing, destined to usurp his power. Peleus lived in constant fear, scrutinizing every stranger, every traveler who came to his city, searching for the telltale sign. The time for Jason's return finally arrived. Having reached manhood, he left Chiron's peaceful mountain retreat and set out for Iolcus to reclaim his rightful inheritance. As he journeyed, he encountered an old woman struggling to cross the swift-flowing river Anorus. Unknown to Jason, this was Hera, queen of the gods, disguised as Tessa's character. Though dressed plainly, in humble shepherd's attire, Jason, true to his compassionate nature, courteously offered to help her. As he carried her across the turbulent waters, the strong current dislodged one of his sandals, sweeping it away. He reached the other side, still carrying the old woman, who then revealed her divine form and promised him her invaluable aid, but now stood before his destiny with only one sandal on his foot. Upon arriving in Iolcus, Jason, now a strapping young man with a flowing leopard skin cloak and a single sandal, immediately drew the attention of the populace. His noble bearing and the missing footwear quickly reached Peleus. The tyrant, recognizing the ominous sign from the oracle, was filled with dread. He summoned Jason to his presence. Jason boldly confronted his uncle, demanding the return of the throne that was rightfully his. Peleus, a master of cunning and deceit, feigned agreement. He declared that he would indeed surrender the throne, but only if Jason first completed a seemingly impossible task, one that would surely lead to his death: retrieve the legendary golden fleece from the distant and perilous land of Colchis. The golden fleece was no mere treasure. It was a prized possession of King Eats of Colchis, hanging in a sacred grove, guarded by a fearsome, never-sleeping dragon. The fleece itself was from the miraculous golden ram that had saved Phrixus and Helle from sacrifice, carrying Phrixus to Colchis. Peleus, knowing the dangers and the near impossibility of the quest, believed Jason would perish in the attempt, thereby eliminating the threat to his reign. He presented the task with an air of challenge, hoping to entice Jason's heroic spirit. Jason, unwilling to appear cowardly and trusting in his own destiny, accepted the perilous quest. To undertake such an unprecedented voyage, a vessel unlike any other was required. Under the guidance and inspiration of the goddess Athena, who favored Jason, the construction of the magnificent ship, the Argo, began. Its name, Swift, was apt, as it was designed for speed and endurance on the open seas. The shipbuilders, led by Argus, after whom the ship was named, crafted it with exceptional skill. Crucially, Athena herself incorporated a magical piece of timber from the sacred talking oak of Dodona into the prow, granting the Argo the ability to speak and offer prophetic guidance. This divine touch imbued the ship with a life of its own, a silent companion on their fated journey. News of the impossible quest and construction of the extraordinary ship spread throughout Greece like wildfire. Driven by the lure of glory, adventure, and the desire to join a legendary undertaking, the greatest heroes from across the land answered Jason's call. This esteemed company became known as the Argonauts, sailors of the Argo. Among them were Hercules, the mightiest hero of all time, fresh from his early labors, though his full 12 tasks were yet to come. His presence alone offered immense strength and prestige. Orpheus, the legendary musician and poet, whose lyre could charm beasts and calm the very waves. Castor and Pollux, the Dioscuri twin brothers, sons of Zeus, one a master horseman, the other an unbeatable boxer. Peleus, Achilles' father, a respected warrior. Typhus, the skilled helmsman, guided by Athena. Lynceus, gifted with superhuman eyesight, able to see through earth and stone. Meleager, the famed hunter of the Caledonian boar. Zets and Calais, winged sons of Boreas, the north wind. And many others, including Augeas, Idas, Amphiaraus, Admetus, Laertes, Odysseus' father, Nestor in some versions, and even Atalanta in some later accounts. The Argonauts represented the pinnacle of Greek heroism, a fellowship destined for unparalleled adventure. With the ship complete and its legendary crew assembled, the Argo set sail from Iolcus. Their first major stop was the island of Lemnos, inhabited solely by women who had murdered all their men due to Aphrodite's curse. The Argonauts were welcomed, and many formed temporary unions, replenishing the island's population. Jason himself had a son with Queen Hypsipyle. Hercules, ever pragmatic, eventually urged them to continue their quest, reminding them of their true purpose. Their journey continued to the land of the Dolions, ruled by the benevolent king Cyzicus. The Argonauts were received warmly, but a tragic misunderstanding unfolded. After departing, a storm drove the Argo back to the same shore by night. Unaware of each other's identities in the darkness, the Argonauts and the Dolions engaged in a fierce battle, believing each other to be enemies. Many Dolions, including King Cyzicus, were slain before the truth was realized at dawn. Jason and the Argonauts mourned deeply, performing funeral rites to honor the fallen king. The journey then led them to Mysia. Here, a poignant and pivotal event occurred that would forever alter the composition of the Argonauts. Hercules' young companion, Hylas, a beautiful youth, went to fetch water from a spring. Nymphs of the spring, enchanted by his beauty, dragged him into the water, intending to keep him forever. Hercules, distraught by Hylas' disappearance, searched frantically for him. Despite the pleas of the other Argonauts, who urged him to continue the quest, Hercules refused to leave until he found Hylas, or at least learned his fate. The Argo, after a long delay, eventually set sail without the mighty Hercules. It was a tragic separation, for the Argonauts lost their greatest strength, and Hercules, consumed by his personal grief, was left behind to continue his own legendary path. The loss of Hercules was a stark reminder that even the greatest heroes had their own destinies, sometimes diverging from the collective quest. The voyage to Colchis, now without its strongest member, became even more daunting as the Argonauts prepared to face the perilous waters and divine challenges that lay ahead. With the profound absence of Hercules, a palpable shift occurred among the Argonauts. The weight of the quest, now seemingly heavier without their strongest member, settled upon Jason's shoulders. Yet, the resolve of the remaining heroes was unwavering. Their magnificent ship, the Argo, guided by the skillful hand of Typhus the helmsman and the wisdom embedded in its Dodonian prow, continued its relentless journey eastward. They sailed through the narrow straits of the Hellespont, leaving the familiar shores of the Aegean behind, and ventured into the vast expanse of Propontis, a sea dotted with islands and shrouded in the unknown. Every league sail brought them closer to Colchis, but also closer to the mythical dangers foretold by ancient legends. Their journey through Propontis led them to the land of the Bebryces, a savage and arrogant people ruled by their king, Amycus. Amycus was a fearsome giant, a son of Poseidon, who boasted of his unparalleled skill in boxing. His cruel custom was to challenge all foreign visitors to a boxing match, and if they lost, he would kill them. Upon the Argonauts' arrival, Amycus issued his customary challenge. Without hesitation, Pollux, one of the Diospori twins and a legendary boxer himself, stepped forward to accept. The boxing match that ensued was brutal. Amycus, with his enormous stature and brute strength, launched powerful blows, but Pollux, swift and agile, dodged his attacks, biding his time. Pollux, renowned for his strategic skill in the ring, found an opening and delivered a devastating blow to Amycus' jaw, crushing it and sending the giant king sprawling to the ground, dead. The Bebryces, enraged by the death of their king, attacked the Argonauts. A fierce skirmish erupted, but the disciplined and heroic Argonauts, led by Castor, Pollux' twin brother, and others, quickly routed the savage tribe, forcing them to retreat. With the threat neutralized, the Argonauts resupplied and continued their journey, having proven their prowess not just against monsters, but against formidable mortal foes. Next, the Argo reached Salmydessus, a coastal town in Thrace. Here, they found the wretched King Phineus, a once great seer blessed with prophetic abilities, now living in abject misery. Phineus had been cruelly punished by Zeus, or Apollo, in some accounts, for abusing his gift of prophecy, either by revealing too much of the future or by giving away divine secrets. His punishment was a dreadful curse. Whenever he tried to eat, the hideous harpies, winged monsters with women's faces and birds' bodies, would swoop down from the sky. They would snatch away or foul his food, leaving him perpetually starving and surrounded by an unbearable stench. He was a gaunt, pathetic figure, a shadow of his former self. Recognizing the king's torment and knowing that divine knowledge often came at a price, the Argonauts, particularly Zets and Calais, the winged sons of Boreas, felt immense pity for Phineus. These two heroes, themselves possessing the gift of flight, were destined to lift the curse. They devised a plan. As soon as the Harpies attacked during a meal, Zets and Calais would chase them away. The Harpies, terrified by the swift pursuit of the Boreads, fled across the sea, never to return. In gratitude, Phineus, now finally able to eat a clean meal, offered the Argonauts invaluable guidance for the perilous journey ahead. Phineus, the cursed prophet now freed, revealed the most terrifying challenge that awaited them: the Symplegades, or clashing rocks. These were two enormous mobile cliffs that guarded the entrance to the Black Sea, the Pontus Euxinus, constantly crashing together, crushing any ship that dared to pass between them. No ship, had ever successfully navigated them before. Phineas advised them on a clever strategy. They were to release a dove and observe its flight. If the dove passed through safely, they too could attempt passage. If it failed, they should turn back. He also warned them of the dangers of Colchis and the trials King Eats would impose. Following Phineas's counsel, the Argo sailed towards the dreaded Symplegades. The Argonauts could hear the thunderous crashes from afar, the terrifying sound of the massive rocks colliding. As they approached, the sight was awe-inspiring and terrifying. The cliffs would separate, revealing a narrow, churning passage, only to slam shut with immense force, sending enormous waves and debris into the air. With their hearts pounding, Jason released the dove. The bird, swift and determined, flew directly for the gap. Just as it darted through, the mighty rocks clashed, but only managed to clip the very tip of its tail feathers. Seeing the dove's success, though narrowly, Jason gave a command to row. The Argonauts pulled at their oars with all their might, their muscles straining, sweat pouring from their bodies. The Argos surged forward into the treacherous strait. The waves churned, and the mighty cliffs began to converge again, threatening to crush them. At this critical moment, Athena, the ever-watchful goddess who had aided in the Argos' construction, intervened. She placed a divine hand on the stern of the ship, giving it a powerful shove that propelled it through the closing gap. Just as the Argo scraped through, losing only the ornate tip of its stern post to the crushing rocks, the Symplegades ceased their relentless crashing. Having been passed for the first time by a ship, their prophecy was fulfilled, and they remained fixed from that moment onward, opening the path to the Black Sea, with the Symplegades safely behind them. A cheer erupted from the Argonauts. They had overcome the most fearsome natural obstacle, guided by prophecy and divine intervention. The waters beyond were now the vast expanse of the Black Sea, leading directly toward their ultimate destination. Their journey became less about raw physical challenges and more about navigating the political and magical landscapes that lay ahead. They passed by the land of the Mariandini, where their helmsman Typhus sadly died and was replaced by Ancaeus. They saw the land of the Amazons in the distance, and the chilling realm of the Chalybes, known for their iron-working and fierce nature. Finally, after navigating the vastness of the Black Sea and facing numerous other, lesser perils, the Argonauts saw it, the distant, verdant shores of Colchis. This was a land shrouded in mystery, famed for its dark magic and its powerful, unwelcoming king. The air itself seemed to hum with an ancient energy, promising both profound danger and fulfillment of their epic quest. The Golden Fleece, their ultimate prize, lay within this mystical kingdom, guarded by a fearsome dragon and presided over by a king who would prove to be a formidable adversary. The most perilous part of their journey was now at hand, for the land of the Golden Fleece would test not only their strength but their very will, introducing them to a force far more potent than any monster they had yet faced. The bewildering, intoxicating, and ultimately tragic power of love and magic. After an arduous journey fraught with peril and the loss of mighty Hercules, the Argo finally reached the mythical land of Colchis, located on the eastern shores of Black Sea. This was no ordinary kingdom. It was a realm steeped in ancient magic, ruled by King Eats, son of Helios, the sun god, and brother to the formidable sorceresses Circe and Pasiphae. The air itself in Colchis seemed to hum with arcane power, a land both breathtakingly beautiful and deeply unsettling, where ancient traditions and powerful enchantments held sway. Here lay the Golden Fleece, their ultimate prize, but also the greatest test of Jason's resolve and the Argonauts' collective fate. Upon their arrival, the Argonauts, led by Jason, marched towards a royal palace. Jason, with a mix of defiance and respect, formally presented his request to King Eats, the return of the Golden Fleece, the sacred artifact that rightfully belonged to his ancestor, Phrixus. King Eats, a man of imposing presence and cunning intellect, harbored a deep-seated suspicion and aversion to foreigners, viewing their arrival as an unwelcome intrusion and a challenge to his authority. Though bound by the laws of hospitality, his heart was filled with treachery and reluctance to part with such a prized possession. Feigning cordiality, Eats agreed to consider Jason's request, but only if the hero could prove his worth by completing a series of seemingly impossible tasks. These were no mere trials of strength. They were tests designed to ensure Jason's swift and brutal demise, tasks that only a demigod or a master of magic could hope to survive. First, Jason had to yoke 2 fire-breathing bulls. These were no ordinary beasts, but the Calcatoroi, monstrous oxen with bronze hooves and fiery breath, creations of Hephaestus himself, who serve eats. Jason was to harness them to a plow. Second, with the fire-breathing bulls, he had to plow a vast, impenetrable field. The ground was hard and unyielding, a task that would break any mortal man, even without the murderous beasts. Third, he was to sow dragon's teeth into the freshly plowed furrows. These were the very teeth of the dragon slain by Cadmus in Thebes, and from them a terrifying harvest would spring forth. Finally, and most deadly, he had to defeat the warriors that would rise from the dragon's teeth. These were fully armed, formidable warriors, sprung from the earth itself, intent on destroying whoever dared to plant them. As Jason faced the chilling prospect of these challenges, a powerful unseen force began to work its magic. High on Mount Olympus, Hera, who had always favored Jason due to his kindness towards her in disguise, appealed to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Hera implored Aphrodite to make Medea, King Aetes' daughter, fall deeply in love with Jason. Aphrodite, in turn, dispatched her son Eros, Cupid, to strike Medea with a golden arrow, piercing her heart with an irresistible passion for the foreign hero. Medea was no ordinary princess. She was a powerful sorceress, a priestess of Hecate, goddess of magic and witchcraft, and a master of herbs, potions, and dark arts, inherited from her father's lineage and honed through her own fierce intellect. As she gazed upon Jason, she was instantly captivated by his noble bearing, his courage, and his youthful beauty. Torn between loyalty to her father and an overwhelming, newly ignited love for the stranger, her heart chose Jason. She knew her father's true intentions, to see Jason fail and perish. Unable to bear the thought of his demise, Medea decided to defy her father and help Jason. Under the cloak of night, Medea secretly met with Jason. Her eyes, filled with a desperate longing and fierce determination, revealed her secret. She offered him her aid, promising to help him overcome her father's impossible tasks, but extracted a solemn vow in return, that he would take her with him to Greece as his wife. Jason, seeing his only hope for success, readily agreed, pledging eternal loyalty and love. Medea then began to impart her vital assistance. She gave Jason a potent magical ointment, prepared from the herb Prometheus's fire, which would protect him from the bull's fiery breath and their bronze hooves for an entire day. She instructed him to anoint himself, his shield, and his weapons with it. When the bulls charged, he would use his strength and the ointment's protection to yoke them. Next, for the dragon's teeth, she gave him crucial advice. Once the warriors sprang from the earth, they would turn on each other if Jason threw a large stone into their midst. Confused by the sudden missile, they would suspect their brethren and fall to fighting amongst themselves, allowing Jason to cut them down while they were distracted and disoriented. Armed with her magic and cunning advice, Jason faced the trials. The next day, before the assembled Colchians and Argonauts, Jason stepped onto the field. He approached the colossal, fire-breathing bulls. Protected by Medea's ointment, he wrestled them, their fiery breath harmlessly washing over him. And with Herculean strength, he yoked them to the plow. He then expertly guided them, plowing the vast field. With the field prepared, he sowed the dragon's teeth. As the armed warriors began to sprout from the earth, a terrifying army emerging from the soil, Jason remembered Medea's instruction. He hurled a massive stone into their midst. As Medea had foretold, the earthborn warriors, confused and suspicious, immediately turned their weapons upon each other, fighting a fratricidal battle. Jason, seizing the opportunity, rushed in and systematically cut down the remaining, bewildered warriors, fulfilling the prophecy. Against all odds, Jason had completed King Aetes' impossible tasks. The Argonauts cheered, while Aetes himself, stunned and enraged by Jason's success, realized his daughter's treachery. His fury was immense. He outright refused to deliver the golden fleece, intending to burn the Argo and slay the Argonauts under the cover of night. But Medea, foreseeing her father's treachery, warned Jason. She knew there was no time to lose. That very night, Medea led Jason to the sacred grove where the golden fleece hung from an ancient oak tree, its golden sheen illuminating the darkness. Guarding it was a Colchian dragon, a monstrous, never-sleeping serpent with eyes like burning coals, whose coils wrapped around the tree. Medea, the powerful sorceress, took charge. She approached the terrifying beast, holding a branch dipped in potent sleeping potions and murmuring ancient incantations. Slowly, under the hypnotic power of her magic and the intoxicating fumes of her brew, the dragon's 100 eyes began to close, its massive coils relaxed, and it finally succumbed to a deep, unnatural slumber. With the guardian subdued, Jason, swift and determined, climbed the tree and carefully detached the magnificent golden fleece. Its shimmering gold filled the grove with an otherworldly light, the object of their long and perilous quest finally in their grasp. Without hesitation, Jason and Medea, carrying the precious fleece, hurried back to the Argo. They roused the waiting Argonauts, and under the cover of darkness, with the sacred treasure secured and Medea, now in exile by Jason's side, the Argo swiftly departed from the shores of Colchis, leaving behind a furious king and a land forever altered by the love and betrayal that had just transpired. Their perilous journey was far from over, for the path back to Greece would demand an even greater price for the golden prize they now carried. With the magnificent golden fleece finally in their possession, its shimmering glory illuminating the dark interior of the Argo's hold, Jason and Medea wasted no time. The Colchian dragon lay inert, its slumber enchanted by Medea's potent magic. The very air around King Aeetes' palace seemed to crackle with his impending wrath. The Argonauts knew their window of escape was narrow, for the king, now fully aware of his daughter's betrayal and the theft of the sacred treasure, would unleash all his fury upon them. Their departure from Colchis was precipitous, a desperate flight under the cloak of night, racing against a dawn that would surely bring Aeetes' vengeance. True to their fears, as the sun rose, King Aeetes discovered the theft. His rage was boundless, a hurricane of fury directed at his treacherous daughter and the audacious foreign heroes. He immediately gathered his fleet, launching a relentless pursuit of the Argo, led by his loyal son Apsyrtus, Medea's own half-brother. The chase was desperate, a race across the vast, open waters of the Black Sea. The Argonauts rowed with all their might, their hearts pounding against their ribs, knowing that capture meant certain death and the loss of everything they had risked. It was in this desperate pursuit that Medea, driven by a terrifying blend of love for Jason, fear of father's wrath, and a chilling innate savagery, committed an act of unspeakable brutality that would forever stain her hands and Jason's soul. As Aeetes' ships, led by Apsyrtus, gained on them, Medea concocted a horrific plan. Some versions say Apsyrtus had been brought on the Argo as a hostage. Others state he led a separate fleet. Regardless, Medea lured him into a trap. When Apsyrtus was within reach, she either ambushed him or, in the most gruesome accounts, murdered and dismembered him. She then began to scatter pieces of his body into the sea behind the Argo. King Aeetes, witnessing the horrifying sight of his son's mutilated remains floating in the water, was forced to halt his pursuit. Overcome with grief and the sacred duty to gather every piece of his son's body for a proper burial, he could not continue the chase. This monstrous act, born of a desperate genius, bought the Argonauts precious time, allowing them to escape. But the memory of Apsyrtus' dismembered corpse and the chilling willingness of Medea to commit such a heinous crime for him would forever haunt Jason and mark the beginning of the dark unraveling of their intertwined fates. It was a clear demonstration of Medea's ruthless power and the terrible price of her love. The escape from Colchis marked the beginning of a long and tortuous return journey, far more complex and dangerous than their outward voyage. The gods, angered by Medea's sacrilegious murder of her brother, sent terrible storms and forced the Argo into convoluted paths. Their route deviated wildly from any known passage, taking them through uncharted waters and mythical lands, ensuring their atonement before reaching home. First, they were directed by the speaking prow of the Argo or by the wisdom of Phineus to seek purification from Circe, Aeetes' formidable sister, who dwelt on an island in the west. Circe, a powerful sorceress renowned for turning men into beasts, reluctantly purified Jason and Medea of the blood guilt of Apsyrtus' murder, though she cursed Medea for her wicked deeds. Their journey then led them past the treacherous islands of sirens, beautiful but deadly creatures whose enchanting songs lured sailors to their doom upon the jagged rocks. But the Argonauts were saved by the divine music of Orpheus. As the sirens began their mesmerizing melody, Orpheus seized his lyre and played a tune so sweet and powerful that it drowned out the sirens' voices, allowing the Argo to pass by safely. The one Argonaut beauties still succumbed to the sirens' lure and leaped into the sea, only to be saved by Aphrodite. Next, they faced a perilous strait guarded by Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla, a monstrous creature with 6 heads and barking dogs at her waist, devoured sailors, while Charybdis, a fearsome whirlpool, swallowed ships whole. Guided once again by the Nereid sea nymphs, Medea's relatives sent by Hera, the Argo managed to navigate the narrow passage, barely escaping the twin perils that claimed countless lives. Their journey wound through various mythical locations, some traditions suggesting routes through the River Po and Adriatic Sea, even briefly touching lands in northern Europe, emphasizing the vastness of their arduous return. They visited the island of the Phaeacians, Corcyra, ruled by King Alcinous and Queen Arete, who offered them refuge. Aeetes' pursuing fleet eventually caught up, demanding Medea's return. But Queen Arete, famed for her wisdom, ruled that Medea should remain with Jason if they were already married. Thus, Jason and Medea quickly solemnized their union, securing their temporary safety. Their final major challenge before returning to Greece came at the island of Crete, guarded by Talos. Talos was a colossal bronze giant, the last of his kind, created by Hephaestus, who tirelessly patrolled the island to prevent intruders. He had a single vein running from his neck to his ankle, sealed by a single bronze nail, which held his ichor, the divine blood of the gods. As the Argonauts approached, Talos began to pelt them with enormous rocks. It was Medea again who saved them. Using her potent magic, she either hypnotized Talos, drove him mad with visions, or, in some accounts, prayed to Charis, spirits of violent death. To drain him, distracted or confused, Talos grazed his ankle against a sharp rock, dislodging the bronze nail. His ichor poured out, and the giant, hollow and lifeless, crashed to the ground, allowing the Argonauts to land safely. Finally, after years of perilous voyages, facing monsters, gods, and the wrath of kings, the Argo returned to Iolcus. Jason, holding the gleaming golden fleece, disembarked, ready to claim his rightful throne. But King Peleus, shrewd as treacherous nature, refused to honor his promise. He claimed that Jason had taken too long, or that the quest was not fully completed to his satisfaction. He made excuses, determined not to relinquish his power. Medea, however, was not to be trifled with. Her love for Jason was fierce, but her fury at injustice and her willingness to use dark magic were even more terrifying. To ensure Peleus' demise, she devised a cunning and gruesome plot. She approached Peleus' daughters, feigning a desire to help them rejuvenate their aging father. She demonstrated her power by cutting an old ram into pieces, boiling it in a cauldron with magical herbs, and then pulling out a vibrant young lamb. Convinced by her demonstration, Peleus' daughters, desperate to restore their father's youth, tragically followed her instructions. They cut their own father into pieces and boiled him in a cauldron. But Medea, of course, withheld the magical herbs, and Peleus simply boiled to death. His daughters, horrified by their unwitting patricide, realized Medea's deception too late. This act, while ridding Jason of his tormentor, was deemed an unforgivable sacrilege by the people of Iolcus. The murder, however justified to Jason, turned public opinion against them. Jason and Medea, now exiled from Iolcus due to Medea's dark deeds, were forced to flee. They found refuge in Corinth, where they lived for many years, raising 2 sons and seemingly finding a semblance of peace. But the peace was fragile, and Jason's ambition, coupled with his weakness of character, led to the final, shattering betrayal. The king of Corinth, Creon, offered Jason his daughter Glauce's hand in marriage, along with the prospect of inheriting the throne. Jason, seeing an opportunity for wealth and power, readily agreed, abandoning Medea and their children. He rationalized his actions, claiming it was for the good of his sons, offering to marry a princess and secure their future. Medea, the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, her family, her homeland, her innocence, was utterly devastated. Her love turned to a terrible, all-consuming rage. She had defied gods and committed atrocities for Jason, and now he cast her aside. Her revenge was swift, ruthless, and horrific, a chilling testament to the depth of her magical power and her wounded heart. She sent Glossy a poison robe and a golden crown as wedding gifts. When Glossy put them on, they burst into flames, consuming her and King Creon, who tried to save his daughter. But Medea's revenge did not end there. In the most devastating act, to cause Jason the ultimate suffering, she murdered her own children, the sons she bore him, before his very eyes. She refused to let them live to face a life of exile and shame, and more importantly, she sought to inflict the maximum pain upon the man who betrayed her. Having unleashed her terrible wrath, Medea, protected by her divine grandfather Helios, who sent her a chariot drawn by winged dragons, escaped to Athens, leaving Jason utterly broken and alone, stripped his family, his new bride, and his hopes for a new kingdom. Jason's end was a pathetic contrast to his glorious beginning. He wandered, a shadow of his former self, cursed and forgotten by most, living out his final days as a lonely, disgraced old man. One day, he returned to the place where his great journey had begun, seeking solace by his rotting ship, the Argo, which lay neglected on the shore. As he rested beneath its decayed hull, a rotten piece of the ship's prow, perhaps a final ironic twist of fate from the once-talking timber Dodona, broke off and fell, striking him on the head and killing him instantly. Thus ended the life of Jason, the hero who achieved the impossible, but whose glory was ultimately consumed by betrayal, broken vows, and the terrible price of the passion he ignited in the heart of a powerful sorceress. His legacy, forever intertwined with the tragic figure of Medea, serves as a poignant reminder that even the greatest triumphs can lead to the most profound sorrows. In the rich tapestry of ancient Greek cosmology, death was not conceived as an absolute end, a void of nothingness. Instead, it was an inevitable transition, a journey from a vibrant light of the mortal world to a vast, unseen kingdom beneath the earth. This realm, often simply referred to as Hades, after its formidable ruler, was the final destination for the souls of all mortals, a shadowy domain distinct from the fiery pits of eternal torment found in later Abrahamic traditions. It was neither a hell nor a heaven in the modern sense, but complex, multi-layered existence, a mirror of mortal life stripped of its immediate sensations and vibrant colors. The very genesis of the subterranean kingdom is deeply rooted in the primordial struggles of the Greek pantheon. After the cataclysmic Titanomachy, the epic war between the Olympian gods and the elder titans, the three most powerful sons of Cronus, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, cast lots to divide the cosmos among themselves. To Zeus fell the dominion of the sky and the heavens, to Poseidon the vast, churning oceans, and to Hades, the eldest brother, fell the solemn and immutable control over the unseen world below the earth, the realm of the dead. Thus, Hades became both the king of this dark domain and the very name by which his kingdom was known, a place of eternal twilight and solemn silence, largely isolated from the sun-drenched world of the living. The moment of death for a mortal was not a simple cessation of breath. It was a separation, a profound severance of the psyche, the soul, or life breath from the physical body. It was believed that in the final breath, the soul, often depicted as a ghostly eidolon, a wispy shadow or image of the deceased, would flutter from the mouth of the dying. This nascent soul would not wander aimlessly. It required guidance, and for this sacred duty, the gods designated Hermes Psychopomp. Hermes, the conductor of souls. With his golden staff, the Kerykeion, Hermes would gently, yet firmly, lead the newly departed souls away from the land of the living, guiding them down unseen paths and through hidden gateways towards their eternal resting place. His role was crucial, ensuring the orderly transition of the dead and maintaining the delicate balance between the realms. While the primary entrance to the underworld was a spiritual passage guided by Hermes, Greek myth also spoke of numerous tangible, physical entrances to the realm of Hades scattered across the mortal world. These were often dark, forbidding places, deep caves, volcanic fissures, or bottomless lakes and swamps, believed to serve as direct portals. Some notable mythical entrances included the Acherusian Lake in Thesprotia, the Cape Teneron in Laconia, a cavern for which Hercules reportedly dragged Cerberus. The Lake of Vernus in Italy, an ancient volcanic crater filled with noxious fumes, considered by Romans as an entrance. The Eleusinian mysteries also hinted as sacred, ritualistic path to the underworld, though not for actual passage of the living, but for spiritual understanding. These sites served as chilling reminders that the world of the living and the dead were not entirely separate, but merely veiled from one another, with fragile points of contact that few dared to approach. Upon reaching the initial boundaries of Hades' domain, the journey of the soul continued, leading to the first and most iconic of the underworld's numerous rivers, the Acheron, the River of Woe or River of Sorrow. Its murky, slow-moving waters marked the true threshold between life and death, and there, awaiting the newly arrived souls, was Charon, the grim ferryman. Charon was an ancient, unkempt figure, often depicted with a scraggly beard, piercing eyes, and a tattered cloak, rowing a small, often rickety skiff across the Acheron. He was the sole means of passage for the dead. But passage was not granted freely. It required payment. It was a deeply ingrained Greek custom, therefore, to place a small coin, an obol, under the tongue of the deceased before burial. This Charon's obol was the fee for passage. Those souls who had been properly buried, whose bodies had received the appropriate rites, and whose families had placed the necessary coin, were ferried across. However, those whose bodies remained unburied, whose families neglected the sacred rites, or who lacked a coin, were condemned to wander the desolate banks of the Acheron for 100 years, forever longing for passage, unable to find rest in either world. This dire consequence underscored the immense importance of proper burial rituals in Greek society, a duty that transcended mere respect and became a matter of eternal salvation for the soul. Beyond the Acheron lay other significant rivers, each reflecting an aspect of the underworld's somber nature. The Cocytus, the River of Wailing or River of Lamentation, whose waters echoed with the cries of the souls mourning their lost lives. Its sound was a constant lamentation, a melancholic backdrop to the silent sorrow of the asphodel fields. The Phlegethon, the River of Fire, a river of molten flame that flowed to the grim depths of Tartarus, serving as a boundary for the most wicked, its fiery currents burning without consuming, a visual representation of eternal torment. Once across the Acheron, and having navigated or passed by the other tributary rivers, the souls would arrive at the true gateway to Hades' inner realms. Here, guarding the very entrance to the Silent Kingdom, stood one of the most terrifying and iconic figures of the underworld, Cerberus, the monstrous three-headed dog. Born of the primordial monsters Typhon and Echidna, Cerberus was a sibling to the Lernaean Hydra and the Chimera, embodying raw, untamed savagery. His heads, each snarling and watchful, his mane of snakes in some depictions, and his venomous bite made him an impregnable guardian. Cerberus's function was twofold and absolute. He prevented the souls of the dead from ever leaving the underworld, ensuring that once a soul entered, it remained confined to its eternal dwelling. Equally crucial, he prevented any living mortal from entering Hades without explicit divine permission or overwhelming heroic might. Only a handful of audacious heroes, like Hercules, who famously captured him as one of his labors, Orpheus, Odysseus, and Aeneas, ever managed to bypass or subdue him, always with extraordinary divine favor or cunning. His incessant barking echoed through the shadowy tunnels, a constant, chilling reminder of the finality of death and the inviolability of Hades' dominion. Thus, the journey of a soul into the Greek underworld was a meticulously structured, almost bureaucratic process. From a fluttering departure of the Psyche, guided by Hermes, to the payment for Charon's ferry across the Acheron, and finally past the vigilant Cerberus, every step reinforced the ancient Greek belief in an orderly, albeit somber, cosmos where even death had its own immutable rules and powerful guardians. The souls were now truly within a realm of Hades, poised to face judgment and be assigned their eternal resting places, a fate determined by the balance of their earthly deeds. Having navigated the treacherous rivers and passed the fearsome Cerberus, the souls of the departed found themselves truly within the realm of the unseen. Here, the air was still and heavy, the light dim and perpetual, and time itself seemed to move with a different rhythm. This was the dominion of a king whose crown was forged from shadow and whose throne rested upon the very foundations of the earth. Hades, the silent, inexorable ruler of the underworld. Hades, often misunderstood and maligned in later interpretations, was not a malevolent deity in the Greek pantheon. He was stern, unyielding, and utterly impartial, but he was also a just and fair ruler of his domain. He embodied the finality of death, a force against which no mortal could contend. As one of the three great Olympian brothers, his power was immense and absolute within his realm. While Zeus commanded the heavens and Poseidon the seas, Hades held sway over the vast riches of the earth. For within his domain lay all the precious metals and gems that mortals so coveted. He was often referred to as Platon, the giver of wealth, not only of earthly treasures, but also of the harvest that sprang from the fertile soil above. His personality was marked by his detachment. He was solitary and rarely left his gloomy palace, preferring the solemn company of the dead to the boisterous gatherings of his Olympian kin. His presence on Olympus was infrequent, a testament to his dedication to his subterranean duties, and perhaps a reflection of his often unpopular role in the cosmic order. He was a guardian of order, ensuring that the boundaries between life and death remained inviolable and that the dead received their due. Beside him, reigning as queen of the underworld, sat Persephone, a figure of profound transformation and dualistic power. Her story is one of the most poignant and foundational myths associated with Hades' realm. Before her descent, she was Kore, the innocent and beautiful maiden, goddess of spring, and daughter of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest. One fateful day, while gathering flowers in a sun-drenched meadow, the earth suddenly split open, and from the chasm emerged Hades, riding in his dark chariot drawn by black horses. He seized Kore, taking her against her will to be his queen in the underworld. Demeter's grief was immense and all-consuming. She wandered the earth, neglecting her divine duties, causing a terrible famine that threatened to end all life. Desperate, Zeus intervened, commanding Hades to release Persephone. However, Hades, ever shrewd, had tricked Persephone into eating a few pomegranate seeds, typically 4, to symbolize the months she would remain. By partaking of the food of the dead, Persephone was bound to the underworld. A compromise was eventually reached. Persephone would spend a portion of the year, usually 1/3 or 1/2, in the underworld with Hades, and the rest with her mother on Olympus. This myth beautifully explained the changing of the seasons. Demeter's joy at her daughter's return brought forth spring and summer, while her sorrow at Persephone's departure ushered in autumn and the barrenness of winter. Persephone, once the innocent Kore, transformed into a powerful, majestic queen, fully embracing her role as a formidable ruler of the dead alongside Hades. Her dual nature, as both the Maiden of Life and the Queen of Death, made her a unique and revered figure, a bridge between the realms. The heart of Hades' dominion was his palace, a grand, yet somber, edifice built into the very bedrock of the earth. Its architecture was imposing, constructed from dark, precious metals like adamant and obsidian, gleaming dully in the perpetual twilight. Great, weighty gates of electrum, guarded by monstrous chthonic beings, separated the inner sanctum from the outer reaches. Inside, vast halls stretched into the gloom, lit by an eerie, internal luminescence rather than sunlight. Though richly adorned with precious stones and metals mined from beneath the earth, the palace was devoid of the vibrant colors and lively sounds of Olympus. It exuded an atmosphere of solemn majesty, echoing profound silence and eternal stillness of death. Here, Hades and Persephone held court on their magnificent thrones, receiving the newly arrived souls and presiding over the final judgment that would determine their eternal fate. For indeed, not all souls simply drifted into the bleakness of the asphodel fields. Most importantly, all souls, upon crossing the Acheron and passing Cerberus, faced the ultimate tribunal, the 3 judges of the dead. These were not gods by birth, but once mortal kings and heroes of exceptional wisdom, justice, and integrity, chosen by Zeus for their unparalleled fairness. Their elevated status reflected the Greek belief that true justice could be embodied even by mortals. Minos, the renowned former king of Crete, famous for his wise laws and just rule during his lifetime. He was often considered the chief judge, especially presiding over the more difficult cases and giving the final verdict when there was disagreement. Rhadamanthus, Minos' brother, also a just king from Crete, later exiled to Boeotia. He was known for his unyielding fairness. He typically judged the souls of Asians or those from the East, applying a strict, unwavering code of ethics. Aeacus, the former king of Aegina, son of Zeus, known for his piety and his unwavering sense of justice. He was said to judge the souls of Europeans or those from the West, and was also responsible for guarding the keys to Hades' realm. These three judges, seated on their thrones at a great crossroads within the underworld, meticulously examined the lives of the deceased. They weighed their virtues and vices, their actions and intentions, applying a divine standard of justice that accounted for every deed, good or ill, performed in their mortal lives. Their decisions were absolute and irreversible, directing each soul to an appropriate eternal dwelling, be it the gloomy plains of Asphodel, the joyous fields of Elysium, or the tormented abyss of Tartarus. Beyond the formal structure of Hades' court, another powerful chthonic deity held significant sway in the shadowy corners and liminal spaces of the underworld. Hecate, a goddess of crossroads, witchcraft, magic, ghosts, and necromancy, Hecate was often depicted with three faces or three bodies, symbolizing her dominion over the past, present, and future, and her ability to traverse realms, the sky, the earth, and the underworld. While not a direct ruler of the dead, her influence was profound. She was invoked by witches and sorcerers in the mortal world, and her presence was palpable at grave sites and places where spirits lingered. In the underworld, Hecate served as a powerful guide for Persephone during her abduction, and later became a close companion and attendant to the Queen of the Dead. She was associated with nocturnal apparitions and the restless spirits of those who died violently or without proper burial. Her connection to magic meant she held sway over the eerie forces that could be summoned from the depths. She was the one who could grant ghosts power, appear at crossroads where choices led to vastly different fates, and was sometimes identified with the Furies. Her ominous presence added another layer of mystery and dread to the unseen realm, a reminder of the potent, ancient magic that permeated the very essence of the underworld. Thus, the realm of Hades was not a chaotic void, but a meticulously organized kingdom, governed by powerful and impartial rulers, and judged by wise and incorruptible kings. Every soul, from the lowliest peasant to the mightiest king, passed through this tribunal, facing the inevitable reckoning of their mortal lives. The fate assigned was eternal, and from these judgments emerged the diverse landscapes of the afterlife, each tailored to the deeds and virtues of the departed. Once judged by the wise kings Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, the souls of the departed were assigned their eternal destinies, directed distinct regions within the vast and complex realm of Hades. These were the ultimate destinations, shaping the very nature of their existence beyond mortal life, reflecting the deeds and virtues or failures of their earthly journey. For the overwhelming majority of souls, the destination was the Asphodel Fields. This was the realm of the common dead, the average individuals who had lived lives neither exceptionally virtuous nor heinously wicked. It was a vast, sprawling landscape of perpetual twilight, perpetually overcast by a sky the color of ash. The ground was covered not by vibrant green grass, but by the pale, featureless flowers of asphodel, an ethereal, ghostly bloom that offered no cheer or scent. Here, the air hung heavy with an oppressive stillness, broken only by the whispers of countless, indistinct voices, the murmurs of forgotten dreams and faded memories. Life in the asphodel fields was an existence devoid of intense joy or profound sorrow. It was a state of eternal mildness, a pervasive sense of apathy and listlessness. The souls, mere shadows, Idola, of their former selves, wandered aimlessly, lacking purpose or passion. Their memories of their mortal lives were vague and indistinct, gradually fading into a general haze of forgotten identities. They possessed no strong desires, felt no sharp pains, and experienced no exhilarating triumphs. They were detached, spectral beings, moving through an endless, gray monotony. Homer's Odysseus, upon visiting the underworld, famously encounters the spirit of Achilles here, who declares he would rather be the lowliest serf in the land of the living than king among the dead in this desolate realm. The asphodel fields, therefore, represented a form of oblivion, a purgatory of tedious neutrality, a melancholic echo of existence where true vitality was forever absent. It was the ultimate embodiment of tedium, the poignant sorrow of simply being without truly living. In stark contrast to the dreary monotony of asphodel lay the Elysian fields or Elysium, This was a hallowed paradise reserved for a select few: the heroes, the virtuous, those favored by the gods, and the initiates of certain mystery cults who had lived exceptionally righteous lives. Elysium was a realm of perpetual beauty and radiant light, basked in its own internal sun that shone with a gentle, golden glow, unlike the harsh glare of the mortal world. It was a land of eternal spring, where lush, verdant groves stretched as far as the eye could see, adorned with fragrant flowers that never withered and shaded by trees whose leaves rustled with soothing whispers. Here, the air was perpetually mild and sweet, carrying the gentle melodies of harps and flutes. The souls of the blessed, unlike the aimless shades of asphodel, were vibrant and whole, retaining their intellect and memories. They engaged in activities that brought them eternal joy: athletic contests, dancing, feasting, singing praises to gods, engaging in philosophical discourse, and simply enjoying the blissful companionship of their fellow heroes and the serenity of the perfect landscape. Heroes like Cadmus, the founder of Thebes, and Peleus, the father of Achilles in some traditions, were said to reside here, enjoying eternal repose and glory. Elysium was not just a reward. It was the ultimate recognition of arete excellence and a testament to divine favor, a true haven where suffering ceased and eternal happiness reigned. Yet, even beyond the idyllic beauty of Elysium, some myths alluded to an even more exalted paradise: the Isles of the Blessed, also known as the Fortunate Isles. These were considered a further extension, or an even higher level of Elysium, an exclusive haven for an exceptionally rare few. To reach the Isles of the Blessed, a soul typically had to achieve perfect moral purity not once, but thrice, through a cycle of reincarnation and successive lives of unwavering virtue. It was the ultimate reward for philosophical enlightenment and consistent righteousness across multiple existences. These islands were believed to be even more resplendent than the main Elysian fields, possibly located in the Western Ocean, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, representing the furthest reaches of blissful existence attainable by a mortal soul. Their glory transcended even that of Elysium, signifying profound spiritual perfection and a unique divine blessing, crucial to the journey of souls through these realms, particularly for those destined for reincarnation or the ultimate peace of Elysium, was the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Its calm, dark waters flowed to the underworld, often depicted as a branch or tributary accessible from different regions. The function of the Lethe was profound and twofold. For those destined for reincarnation, souls about to be reborn into a new mortal life would drink from the waters of Lethe. This act would erase all memories of their past lives, allowing them to begin their new existence with a clean slate, free from the burdens and biases of former experiences. This ritual ensured that the cycles of rebirth were fresh and unencumbered for those in Elysium. In some traditions, even souls dwelling in Elysium would drink from the Lethe to achieve a deeper, more profound peace. By shedding the painful or confusing memories of their mortal lives, they could fully embrace the serenity and eternal joy of paradise, unburdened by past sorrows or regrets. The river Lethe, therefore, was a vital component of the underworld's economy of souls. It served as a cosmic mechanism for renewal and a pathway to true tranquility, highlighting the Greek understanding of memory's burden and the liberating power of oblivion. It offered a poignant contrast to the river Mnemosyne memory, found in some esoteric traditions, whose waters brought eternal recollection. Thus, the judgment in the underworld led not to a single monolithic afterlife, but to a diverse spectrum of eternal existences, from the dull, aimless wandering of the asphodel fields to the radiant, joyful repose of Elysium and the ultimate serenity of the Isles of the Blessed. Each destination underscored a Greek belief in a cosmic justice that meticulously weighed mortal deeds. The underworld, far from being just a place of punishment, was a meticulously organized reflection of human life itself, a final, unyielding testament to the choices made in the fleeting flicker of mortality. While the asphodel fields offered a shadowy oblivion and Elysium a blissful eternity, the Greek underworld also contained a realm of unyielding despair, a place reserved for the most heinous transgressions against gods and mortals alike. This was Tartarus, the deepest and darkest abyss of the entire cosmos, a primordial pit that existed not merely beneath the earth, but was conceptually separate, lying as far beneath Hades as the earth was beneath the heavens. It was the antithesis of light and life, a realm of perpetual torment, unrelenting punishment, and cosmic imprisonment. Tartarus was depicted as a vast, bottomless chasm, perpetually shrouded in impenetrable gloom, colder and more suffocating than any mortal darkness. Its air was thick with the despair of its prisoners and the stench of their eternal suffering. It was a place where existence was reduced to an endless cycle of futility and agony, designed to break the spirits of even the most powerful beings. Iron gates, forged by Hephaestus himself, guarded its entrance, and a wall of bronze surrounded it, sealing off its horrors from the rest of the underworld. The origin and initial purpose of Tartarus as a prison are intrinsically linked to the dawn of the Olympian age. It was here that Uranus, the primordial sky god, confined his monstrous children, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, before Cronus released them. More significantly, after the devastating Titanomachy, the 10-year war between the Olympian gods and the Elder Titans, Zeus and his victorious siblings cast the defeated Titans into Tartarus, chained there for eternity, under the watchful eye of the Hecatoncheires, who, having sided with Zeus, now serve as their jailers. The Titans' imprisonment established Tartarus as the ultimate cosmic dungeon, a place from which escape was deemed impossible, a stark warning against defying the newly established divine order. Within this abyssal realm, the principal executioners of divine justice were the Erinyes, more commonly known as the Furies. These ancient, terrifying goddesses, born from the blood of Uranus when Cronus castrated him, embodied vengeance and retribution. With serpentine hair, bat-like wings, and wielding whips, torches, or staves, they relentlessly pursued and tormented those who had committed grave offenses, especially parricide, matricide, and oath-breaking, ensuring that the guilty knew no rest. In Tartarus, they were the unyielding wardens and torturers, inflicting precise and eternal punishments decreed by the Olympian gods and the judges of the dead. They personified the implacable nature of divine justice, ensuring that no crime, especially those against family or divine law, went unpunished. Countless souls suffered in Tartarus, but some punishments became legendary, serving as cautionary tales against hubris, deceit, and sacrilege. Sisyphus, perhaps the most famous denizen of Tartarus, Sisyphus was a cunning and deceitful king of Corinth, known for his treachery, trickery, and contempt for the gods. He even managed to cheat death twice, once by tricking Thanatos, the god of death, and again by escaping from Hades himself. For his audacious defiance, his eternal punishment was the essence of futility. He was condemned to perpetually roll an immense boulder up a steep hill. Just as he neared the summit, the rock, through an invisible divine force, which slipped from his grasp and thundered back down to the bottom, forcing Sisyphus to descend and begin his agonizing, pointless labor anew for all eternity. His torment was not just physical, but psychological, the endless, repetitive failure. Tantalus, another king, beloved by the gods, Tantalus was cursed for various transgressions, most notably for attempting to deceive the gods by serving them his own son, Pelops, in a stew during a banquet, to test their omniscience. For this heinous act of sacrilege and cruelty, he was condemned to suffer eternal thirst and hunger in the midst of abundance. He stood in a pool of water that would recede every time he bent to drink, and delicious fruit hung on branches above him, just out of reach, rising higher whenever he stretched to grasp it. The tantalizing proximity of satisfaction, perpetually denied, became his unending agony. Ixion, a king from Thessaly. Ixion was one of the first mortals to commit the unspeakable crime of kinslaying, murdering his father-in-law. Though Zeus, in a moment of pity, brought him to Olympus and purified him, Ixion then compounded his crimes by attempting to seduce Hera, Zeus's queen. For this ultimate act of ingratitude and hubris, Zeus punished him severely. Ixion was bound to a fiery, winged wheel that spun eternally through the air of Tartarus. His punishment symbolized both endless torment and the inescapable consequences of betrayal against divine hospitality and cosmic order. The Danaids, these were the 50 daughters of King Danaus. All but one of them, Hypermnestra, obeyed their father's command to murder their husbands on their wedding night. For this collective act of matricide and betrayal, they were condemned to an eternal, futile labor. Their punishment was to carry water in sieves or leaky jars and attempt to fill a bottomless tub. They were forever engaged in an endless, fruitless task, their efforts perpetually wasted as the water endlessly drained away, symbolizing the unending, unfulfilled desire for atonement for their grievous sins. Tityos, a giant son of Zeus or Gaia, Tityos incurred divine wrath when he attempted to rape Leto, mother of Apollo and Artemis, on her way to Delphi. For this heinous crime against the goddess, he was punished with an eternity of agonizing torment. He was stretched out across 9 acres of ground, his enormous body impaled. 2 gigantic vultures, or sometimes snakes or eagles, perpetually feasted upon his liver, which, like that of Prometheus, would regenerate each night, ensuring his suffering was unending. His torment was a brutal warning against sexual violence and disrespect towards the gods. Beyond these famously tortured souls, Tartarus also held countless others who had committed grave sins against the gods, humanity, or the natural order. Among them were Salmoneus, who impersonated Zeus and was struck down by his thunderbolt, and Lycaon, who attempted to serve human flesh to Zeus, earning him the transformation into a wolf and a place in the darkest abyss. The justice meted out in Tartarus was not meant for redemption or reform. It was absolute and implacable. It served as a stark, eternal reminder of the consequences of hubris, impiety, and profound moral corruption in the mortal world. The suffering inflicted was perfectly tailored to crime, an agonizing symbolic echo of their earthly transgressions. In the chilling depths of Tartarus, there was no hope for respite, no possibility of escape, only the grinding, ceaseless cycle of punishment, echoing the finality of Hades' reign and the unyielding nature of divine law. For countless eons, the realm of Hades maintained its immutable boundaries, a domain where souls entered but from which none, save the gods themselves, were meant to return. Yet, such was the audacity of mortal heroes, driven by love, duty, or an insatiable thirst for knowledge, that a select few dared to defy this cosmic law. These were the legendary figures who ventured into the very heart of the underworld, and, by the grace of gods or their own extraordinary cunning and courage, found a path back to the sunlit world. Their journeys stand as the ultimate testament to human determination and the enduring fascination with the mysteries of death. One of the most poignant tales of descent belongs to Orpheus, the legendary Thracian musician and poet. After his beloved wife, Eurydice, tragically died from a snakebite, Orpheus was inconsolable. His grief was so profound that he resolved to venture into the underworld itself to retrieve her. Armed only with his lyre and his unparalleled gift of music, he charmed his way past Charon, whose usual grim demeanor softened at the plaintive melodies and even lulled the fearsome Cerberus into a deep sleep. His music moved the very Furies to tears and brought a temporary halt to the eternal torments of Sisyphus and Tantalus. Orpheus stood before Hades and Persephone, pleading his case with a song so moving that even the unyielding king of the dead felt a pang of pity. Hades agreed to release Eurydice, but on one condition. Orpheus must lead her out of the underworld, and he must not look back at her until they both reached the light of the upper world. Filled with desperate hope, Orpheus began the ascent, Eurydice following silently behind. But as he neared the threshold of the living world, consumed by anxiety and yearning, he glanced back just before Eurydice had fully crossed. In that instant, her ghostly form was drawn back into the shadows, lost to him forever. Orpheus's journey highlighted the overwhelming power of love and art, but also the cruel finality of Hades' laws and the tragic consequences of even a moment's doubt. Another monumental journey into the underworld was undertaken by Hercules as his 12th and most perilous labor. His task, imposed by King Eurystheus, was to bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed guardian of Hades' gate. This was not a quest of subtlety, but one of raw, unparalleled strength and divine favor. Hercules first sought initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries to purify himself from past blood guilt, ensuring safe passage. He journeyed to the entrance at Teneron and descended, confronting ghosts, monsters, and even Hades himself. With the aid of Hermes and Athena, Hercules wrestled Cerberus into submission, using only his immense strength and a special lion-skin cloak to protect himself from the guardian's fangs and venom. He then dragged the snarling beast, bound by chains, back to the upper world, terrifying Eurystheus and fulfilling the most impossible of all his labors. Heracles' feat symbolized the ultimate triumph of heroic might over death itself. demonstrating that even the gatekeeper of the underworld could be conquered. Odysseus, the cunning hero of the Trojan War, also ventured to the edge of the underworld, though his journey was in Achaea, a summoning of the dead rather than a full descent into its realms. Guided by Circe, Odysseus traveled to the farthest shores of the ocean, where the Cimmerians dwelt in perpetual mist. There, he performed a chthonic ritual, digging a trench and offering sacrifices of blood, which drew the shades of the dead to him. His purpose was to consult the blind prophet Tiresias, who alone could reveal the path home to Ithaca. Among the throng of spirits, Odysseus spoke with his mother, Anaclea, his fallen comrades, Achilles and Ajax, and witnessed the torments of figures like Tantalus and Sisyphus. Odysseus' journey underscored the Greek reliance on prophecy and divine guidance, as well as a profound connection between the living and the dead, emphasizing the respect and grief owed to those who had passed on. Later in Roman mythology, but drawing heavily from Greek tradition, Aeneas, the Trojan hero, undertook a pivotal descent into the underworld in Virgil's Aeneid. Guided by the Cumaean Sibyl and armed with the golden bow, a sacred gift to Persephone, Aeneas entered Hades through Lake Avernus. His purpose was not to retrieve a lost love or capture a beast, but to seek guidance from his deceased father, Anchises, on his destiny to found Rome. Aeneas passed by the various rivers, saw the lamenting infants and those who died for love in the asphodel fields, and skirted the terrifying walls of Tartarus, glimpsing the punishments within. He eventually found Anchises in the serene fields of Elysium, where his father revealed to him the glorious future of Rome, showing him the parade of future heroes and leaders. Aeneas' journey was a profound exploration of destiny, piety, and eternal lineage that bound the living to the dead, reinforcing the concept of a grand, divinely ordained purpose. Finally, in a testament to the power of love and perseverance, the mortal princess Psyche descended into the underworld as part of the impossible task set for her by Aphrodite. Her final task was to obtain a small box containing a drop of Persephone's beauty from the queen of the underworld herself. Guided by a helpful voice, often interpreted as Zeus or the Tower, Psyche carefully navigated the dangers, paying Charon and giving Cerberus honeycakes to pass. She succeeded in her mission, obtaining the box directly from Persephone. Her journey symbolized the trials of the human soul in its quest for divine love and immortality, demonstrating that even a mortal woman, driven by love, could venture into Hades and return, ultimately achieving apotheosis. These daring incursions into the Forbidden Realm were not mere adventure stories. They held profound significance for the Greek understanding of mortality and heroism. They reinforced the inviolable nature of Hades while simultaneously celebrating the extraordinary courage required to defy it. They showed that even in death, love, duty, and destiny could exert their pull, offering a glimmer of connection between the two worlds. They allowed mortals to gain divine insight, achieve extraordinary feats, and confront the very boundaries of human existence, enriching the Greek perception of heroism beyond mere battlefield prowess. Furthermore, the concept of the underworld was intricately linked to the Eleusinian mysteries, secret religious rites celebrated in Eleusis in honor of Demeter and Persephone. Initiates of these mysteries, by participating in sacred rituals and consuming the Kykion, a ritual drink, hope to gain a more favorable fate in the afterlife, particularly a blessed existence in Elysium. These mysteries offered a path to hope beyond the bleakness of ordinary death, hinting at the possibility of a happier existence for those who lived righteously and understood the cosmic cycle of death and rebirth. While not a direct promise of reincarnation in all versions, they certainly emphasize the cyclical nature of life and the soul's journey. The rich and detailed mythology of the Greek underworld has had an enduring and profound impact on Western literature, art, and philosophy, shaping our collective understanding of death, judgment, and the afterlife. Virgil's Aeneid, with Aeneas' descent, became a foundational text for later concepts of the underworld. Dante Alighieri's Inferno, the first part is Divine Comedy, is perhaps the most famous work directly inspired by Greek and Roman underworld narratives, mapping out circles of hell and specific punishments, often echoing the torments of Tartarus. The symbolism of the Styx, Charon, and Cerberus permeates countless works of art, poetry, and music. Even in modern psychology, the underworld, or shadow realm, appears as a metaphor for subconscious mind, a place of hidden fears, desires, and unresolved conflicts that must be confronted for psychological integration. In conclusion, the Greek underworld was far more than a mere resting place for the dead. It was a complex and dynamic realm, a fundamental pillar of Greek cosmology that reflected their deepest beliefs about human morality, justice, and destiny, from the grim efficiency of Hermes, Psychopomp, and Charon, to the impartial wisdom of the judges, and the distinct eternal landscapes of Asphodel, Elysium, and Tartarus. Every detail served as a mirror to the choices made in life. It was a place of profound finality, yet also a stage for divine justice and, on rare occasions, a testament to the extraordinary courage of mortals who dare to challenge its gates. The underworld continues to fascinate and inspire, a timeless testament to humanity's eternal quest to understand what lies beyond the veil.